My name is Brian Rice. I'm a third-generation wine grower, and I've been making wine for over 2 decades here in Santa Barbara wine country. It's more than a job. It's a calling. Join me as I talk to my fellow winemakers in a series that is a candid conversation between winemakers discussing their wines, their craft, and their lives over 2 glasses of wine.
Hi, I'm Brian Rice, and thank you for joining us for 2 Glasses In. I'm here with the legendary Frank Ostini of Hitching Post. He's both a chef and a winemaker. And Frank, I'm honored to have you here today on the show.
Great to be here, Brian.
I thought I'd just start out by saying, we're so blessed to live in Santa Barbara and in wine country. Santa Barbara is known as the American Riviera. We have this beautiful Spanish heritage. The architecture is beautiful, pressed up against the mountains. We have this beautiful coastline and beaches and surf and volleyball and sailing and the most amazing islands off the coast. That we pinch ourselves every day, right, when we go to work and we here in wine country.
And when you come up the coast from Los Angeles, just 2 hours to the south, it's very urban until you get to Santa Barbara. And once you get over the mountains into the San Ynez Valley, it is cattle country, vineyard land, agriculture.
Horses.
Horses, ostriches. I mean, it's another world.
I think about your beginnings, and I think about what you've experienced in the last 30, 40 years. I've only been here for about 25, so I can imagine what you've seen in the build-up and evolution of our region. You got into this through the restaurant business with the beginnings of Hitching Post.
Yeah, the Hitching Post, the original Hitching Post in Casmelia, California, 12 miles outside of Santa Maria, was bought by my parents in 1952. That was the year I was born. So I grew up in the food business. So we are steeped in the culture of Santa Maria style barbecue, cooking over an oak wood fire that has been done here for hundreds of years. Even before the Spanish came to California, the Native American Shumash were cooking over the wood, and it's the coast live oak that grows on the hills here. I went off to college and came back and became the bar manager. They wanted good wine with this good food that we had. And we had this great reputation always for steaks cooked over this wood fire. We've expanded the menu to all kinds of things, but I wanted to make wine just to bring it into the family restaurant.
I was under the assumption that you're really more passionate about food first and then wine came along as a secondary thing, but now it's starting to sound to me like wine's always really been there for you.
I don't know. It seemed too simple to me, just really good food. And until I put wine on the table and started doing food and wine together, did it open my eyes up to the fact that what we had was very special, that my family had. Falling in love with wine made me fall in love with the food. I mean, it was always there.
When you started making wine, did you start thinking about, I'm crafting this wine to go with my food, or was it just to make a great wine?
We were emulating the Burgundian style, using techniques that actually Jim Clendenin had gone to Burgundy and studied how they did it and came back with ideas. And so we had an idea to try to make the Burgundian style earthy and spicy by aging it in barrel with its lees. And that turns out to be a more complex style of wine that works with the food I have. I don't think it was my idea to make it for the food. I was just trying to make wine. Mm-hmm. And of course now everyone says, well, you make the wine to go with the food, right? And, well, I guess so. It's evolved to be, as a chef, we work with intense ingredients, especially the wood of the fire that we cook with. The smoke can be an extremely intense flavor. It can easily overpower the food, depending on how you burn the fire. And we burn it clean, and so it has a distinct flavor, but it's elegant, and combined with the seasonings doesn't overpower the protein or the vegetable that you're cooking.
I'm forgetting you're talking about food right now. It almost sounds like you're talking about barrels.
Well, we take the same thing into the winemaking. Yeah. So I make wine with the sensibilities of a chef.
I love that. What's the grape?
80% Valdegui from French Camp,
Really?
and 20% Pinot Noir.
That's different.
You know, it's from the hottest region that we may get grapes from,
Yeah.
and it's the lowest pH grape
really?
that we work with.
So does it age well, or?
Yeah, it ages good.
Not that it should, I just...
It's always better the second year.
Huh. I've found that with all my wines. So Frank, this rosé is phenomenal. I love rosé. A lot of people don't realize it's actually red grapes that are on the skins for just overnight, sometimes just in the press.
We call it pinks, and we've been making it since 2007. So even before rosé was real popular, and you know, we make 1,800 cases of this.
Nice.
So we do partial barrel fermentation. So we do about half in barrel, half of it in stainless steel tanks. We're using machine-picked fruit from the French Camp Vineyard up in Shandon, which is a very, you know, up in San Luis County, one of the warmest spots. But this grape turns out to have very low pH. We like very crisp, very dry. So there's no residual sugar. This is totally dry, with 20% of Pinot Noir that is to give a richness to it. So it's a light, you know, sort of strawberry character with a little bit of richness, aged in barrel on its lees for, you know, 5 or 6 months and bottled in the spring. We want them crisp and light and refreshing. I guess it goes with food being so dry, but you can drink it.
I prefer them dry. This is delicious.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah. No, it's the ultimate versatile food wine. It's also great as an aperitif. I mean, it's a great summer wine.
And we're proponents that you can drink it all year round. You know, before a meal, or even
Thanksgiving, right?
Yeah.
Great with turkey and cranberry.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Why is Santa Barbara so distinctive and different, would you say, compared to other regions?
Well, we have tremendous diversity of climate. So basically the region is more southerly in our hemisphere than most fine winemaking regions could be. They're mostly located higher up, but we have this cool climate based upon the ocean influence that we have, by that unique geography that the mountains were turned sideways and the breezes can come in.
So tell me how you currently have a partner in Hitching Post Wines, Great Hartley. Tell me how you guys kind of collaborate on that process.
So basically, we taste everything separate, make quality judgments on it. For me, I get an idea of what has the structure, what has different fruit components, what has the finish, and then I make an intellectual blend where I make a guess at what the blend might be, and that is assembled, and we taste that. It's a process that takes 2 or 3 months to complete. You know, it seems to work out, and so that's a great collaboration, but I have to depend on him for the drinkability aspect of our wines. And you know, most of our wines are drank when they're very young. Cannot make wines that require a long time before you open them. You never sell a bottle.
Well, you could sell them in the restaurant, but once you take your wines to stores and restaurants outside of your bubble, it becomes much more difficult because it's all about what they want, not about what you want as a winemaker.
Absolutely.
For that particular, you know, I've found myself in the past saying, oh, I'm going to make this really crazy Cabernet Franc at 12% alcohol, and I'm going to take it out, and you get crickets. You get crickets.
Yeah.
And then you go out with a Pinot that's got a slight sweetness to it, and it's a crowd pleaser, we call it, right? And it just sells like crazy.
In 2016, it's always been our best vineyard and our barrels.
So Frank, tell me about the beginnings of Highliner and the reason behind the name.
So it was back in 1998, and we had a new vineyard and we were going to bottle it. We were excited about another bottling, and then we did a classic cuvee with Chris Whitcraft. And Chris had Bien Nacido, and we had our Sanford and Bennett. And we combined those two together.
Legendary vineyards, wow.
And what are we going to call it now? Okay, now we got to come up with some kind of name for it. I said, Gray, do you have some name in the fishing thing that's like headliner? Well, you know, there is the best fisherman in the fleet's called the Highliner. I'm going, Highliner, best fisherman in the fleet? Okay, well, this is the best wine of our fleet. Let's use that name.
You know, this is a legendary wine. As long as I can remember, you know, since the movie Sideways especially.
So that was the wine.
This was it.
This was one of the main wines they drank in the movie Sideways. They showed the label several times. They drank it several times. They were in the restaurant. We used to give Rex Pickett a ride home once in a while because he would close the bar.
And
Can
that
you
just
imagine?
changed your entire world. I mean, you have to tell me what happened.
I'm a total skeptic for anything given. You know, no one's going to come and give me anything. Rex Pickett, the man who wrote the novel, was hanging out at the bar and doing angst, over drinking quite a bit.
He was being Miles.
He was doing the Miles thing. He was writing the book, but he didn't have the wine part of the book in there until he came into my restaurant. He befriended the bartender, and then he had a crush on a waitress. He wrote us in.
So it's really a real life story, an experience that he had while he was here, which is why
some of it. Yeah,
the restaurant made it into the movie. Right?
Exactly. We were written in from the go.
So tell me about this sideways effect. I experienced it in my winery for about 5-6 years afterwards, and the number of tourists that came to Santa Barbara wine country was incredible.
Yeah.
Tell me how it impacted you.
Well, immediately for us is the restaurant, which was prominent in the movie.
Because we knew it was going to just change everything.
When I walked out of that movie, our jaws kind of dropped. If anybody sees this, they will come, is how I felt.
So tell me how one movie impacted Merlot for not just the industry, but for your restaurant.
And Merlot was the first wine we ever made from Firestone Vineyard, 1979, a Merlot. It was delicious. What is that? A joke in a movie? I don't understand how that could affect a Merlot producer's business. It's just, the power of media is unbelievable. That was a joke.
Incredible what happened to our business. We had to take all the Merlot we had and start blending it into red wines, red blends, and calling them something fanciful in order to move through it. It was about 2/3 of our inventory. But in the last 10 years, Merlot's definitely had a comeback. It's nothing like it was in the 90s when the baby boomers discovered it.
I will contend that the movie Sideways and the popularity of Pinot Noir that came, and there's a lot of good Merlot.
Yeah, that is the side effect of Sideways, right? There's a lot of great Merlot because in order to be a Merlot in this climate, it has to be good. And that's what we finally felt the confidence to finally start releasing Merlots again. And it's refreshing for all those old fans who used to love the Merlot because they remember the good old days when we were known for it.
Yes.
And it's nice to have it back.
So that like brought the movie alive to people, and then brought our wine to people that you couldn't believe.
And it helped elevate the entire Santa Barbara brand as well. I think the entire region benefited from it. And you know, Frank, I have to say you're one of the hardest working guys I know in the industry. And not only are you in the wine industry, but you're also a chef.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't imagine how many years you've been working, 8 to 12 hour days, and you just seem tireless. I don't know how you've managed to pull it off. What's your secret?
I always want to tinker. I always want to try new things. So now I have a lunch business and a tasting room business. Those are two different, totally different than the restaurant itself. But we cook food in the restaurant, deliver it to the tasting room in a 3-wheeled electric cart or a tricycle, and it's going fantastic. But it's a whole nother sets of jobs.
You're a true entrepreneur. I totally respect you, and I know what it means to get bored. We do this to ourselves. We keep taking on more and more and more.
I know. So my life is food and wine. I mean, it just is, and I'm happy for that. I'm blessed with the chance to have been involved since almost the beginning of the wine business here, and to see it happen. And there's We all have great stories to tell, and we don't tell them. We're convinced that there's a piece of us in the wine, and people talk about the energy that goes in, and that people can feel that energy elsewhere. But having the story is so helpful. I'm convinced we have to get everybody's story.
Well, I'll tell you what, this has been a delightful conversation. I'm honored that you've come to my home to talk about wine in Santa Barbara. We're honored to have you on the show, and I can't wait to see where you go. And
we have so much to look forward to. I can't wait till harvest.
Awesome. Thank you. Cheers.
Cheers.
My name is Brian Rice. I'm a third-generation wine grower, and I've been making wine for over 2 decades here in Santa Barbara wine country. It's more than a job. It's a calling. Join me as I talk to my fellow winemakers in a series that is a candid conversation between winemakers discussing their wines, their craft, and their lives over 2 glasses of wine. Hi, I'm Brian Rice, and welcome to 2 Glasses In. I'm here with Brian Babcock of the famous Babcock Winery, and I'm honored to have you here today, Brian. Thank you for being here.
It's great to be here. I usually find in these kinds of things that if the guy who's asking the questions is also a winemaker,
Yeah.
it keeps it interesting.
That's what I was thinking too. In the concept of this show, we were really looking to bring some of the friends that I've had over the last 2 decades to the table and talk about our region, talk about our styles, our philosophies, but also get to know you a little bit better.
Sure.
Something I may have not known about you before.
Right on.
So we're 2 glasses in. We've been talking about a little bit of politics of wine and possibly some of the more, winemaker geeky stuff that some people may not need to know.
Right.
So, but today I was really hoping we could talk about you and what drives you and your passions.
But tell me about the winemaking styles of today that you're working on, and maybe elaborate a bit on what makes your wines different.
The last 20 years has really been all about mastering the classics, because my backyard exploded. The Santa Rita Hills exploded. And so whereas I started the process in 1984, I was the only vineyard and winery on Highway 246. Of the appellation that we are on, there's probably 30 to 35 vineyards now, and 6 to 8 wineries along 246. And the same thing has happened, of course, over on Santa Rosa Road in the southern end of the appellation. So there's spectacular vineyard after spectacular vineyard, and it's just like I'm a kid in a candy store. And so I've been able to put together just a wonderful portfolio of single vineyard, single block, stunning Pinots like the one that we're tasting out of Block 3 at Bent Rock. These little sites where you just find these magical pockets of soil so that you really taste the signature of that soil and that climat in the wine.
So tell me about this Pinot. I'm really excited to taste this. It's called Deja Vu 2017 vintage.
I brought this wine to drive home the concept and the idea of terroir. This wine is so earthy and so expressive of the soil that it's grown in. So it's a small block of Pinot at the spectacular Bent Rock Vineyard over on Santa Rosa Road. And this block has, from day one, has just been making these wines that just express themselves a little bit it's just like another level, another layer of earthiness and complexity, and it's kind of very specific every year. So you really get the feeling that the signature in the wine is coming from that dirt.
That's what it's all about, right?
Yes.
So many winemakers are terroirists. You know, they're very much about capturing the
Absolutely.
essence of the site in the bottle. And how much is that for you important versus stylizing the wine in the cellar?
Well, when you look at Pinot Noir in the Santa Rita Hills, this is such a good conduit to the soil and to expressing that soil, right? Some varieties you want to blend, but Pinot Noir is all about expressing that dirt from that place. I mean, you can blend, you can make nice wines. Right now, my head is all wrapped around terroir, you know, and sort of this single vineyard stuff. I call the wine Deja Vu because it's grown on a little protrusion on the Bent Rock property looking down over the San Ynez River, sort of slightly south facing. And I used to, back in the day when there were no vineyards over there except Sanford and Benedict, I would just drive around over there and dream about, you know, what's this place going to be like if there's vineyards on all these hillsides? Well, that day is now. And this little bench top where Block 3 is at Bent Rock is one place where I would just like, you know, just stop and drool. Like, what if there's a vineyard on that thing someday? And then sure enough, I drove up to it and it was like, oh my God. And I was having this deja vu moment, like, right? There's the vineyard I've always dreamed about. I've been there before, at least mentally. And then went into a state of panic, like, oh my God, who's doing this? I got to get their phone number because I have to work with that vineyard right there.
I'll tell you what, it's just beautiful now, but it tastes, and the mouthfeel of the wine makes me think it's going to last a long time.
It should, yeah. Good tannins, great acidity, good balance. Yeah, it should go the distance. I don't know if there is another county or geographical region that has quite as much as we do. You just look at San Ynez, where you start in the Santa Rita Hills and the cool climate and all the opportunities there. You migrate into the middle, the Ballard Canyon area, probably some of the best Syrah maybe on the planet. And then you go further in, like where you guys are in Happy Canyon, things warm up, and then there's a whole another cornucopia of opportunities in varieties and different ways to farm. I would say that's probably, there's so many different things going on that's probably what sets us apart.
Maybe you could tell me that story I heard about stealing substrate from UC Davis Vineyard.
Oh, my first wine. It's probably one of the craziest experiences that I've ever had in the wine business, and it was right in the beginning. I was at University of California, Davis, you know, sitting in a lot of classrooms, looking at a lot of chalkboards, and it was all very interesting, but I wasn't really getting my hands on anything, you know. I wanted to see some fermentation, right? And I had noticed in one of my VIT classes that in some of the student vineyards, at the end of the year, they would get all their data, they would do all their teaching, students would learn everything about farming, and then they would cut the fruit to the ground because there's just no commercial destination for the fruit, right? So walked past this one block one day, and I'm like, well, what's with all this fruit on the ground? And I asked the assistant, he goes, oh, we're done. We're just done with it. You know, we've got our data. I'm like, oh, okay, thank you. So I called my buddy, who was a friend of mine when I was an undergraduate. I said, bro, get over here tonight. We are gonna make some wine. We drove over, it was like midnight, we drove over to the student block where I knew the fruit was with this big, massive trash can. But the fruit's just right there on the ground, so we're just, you know, putting fruit in the trash can and just loving life and everything's cool. And then we got up to this fence, and I realized I probably made my first winemaking mistake because this trash can now weighed like 250 pounds, right? And we had to get it up and over the fence. And so we got it up and we sort of got it nestled on the fence, teeter-tottering, and then we lost control of it and then went flying. And the next thing I know, we're like on the ground, wallowing in grapes. And then—
How old were you at this point?
22.
Yeah.
Right? And then we see flashlights coming toward us. And we're on the ground, and sure enough, it's the police. And they're like, hey, boys, what are you doing? So I introduced myself. Well, hello, officer. I'm Brian Babcock, and I'm a graduate student here at the University of California. And I'm working on my master's, and I made a mistake in the lab. And I've got this hyperactive enzyme that comes from Denmark, and it only lasts 48 hours.
And he's like, what are you talking about?
Yeah. In the middle of my trial, I made a mistake, and now I need some more substrate. He's like, what? I go, I need some more grapes. for my trial. I go, why else would I be out here? And he's like, he looks at his partner. So the guy goes, you know what? That's a pretty good story. So I'll tell you what, me and my partner, we're gonna drive around the block. And if we get back and you guys are still here, then you're gonna come with us and we're gonna take you downtown. So the guy leaves and I just frantically start scooping the grapes. I'm just scooping up everything, mud, dirt, rocks, and Ted's like, what are you, let's get out of here. I go, come on, Teddy, let's go. So we got like half a trash can full and then hightailed it out of there, made it back to my apartment. And then I made my second viticultural mistake in my life, which was to take my crop and put it in my bathtub, which was also my shower, and which was, you know, it's got to ferment.
You made a bathtub wine.
Yeah, bathtub wine, and which was fine until I realized I can't take a shower now.
For 2 weeks?
For 3 weeks. Right?
Oh man.
So it's a blend of Grenache Blanc and Claret.
So Brian, tell me about this.
So this wine, I brought this wine because it's such an expression of the county and what's happening in Santa Barbara County. So this is a blend of a couple of Rhone varieties. Most people, if you're a wine drinker, you've heard of Marsanne or Roussanne or Viognier, or maybe even Grenache Blanc. This is a blend of Grenache Blanc and another grape called Claret.
That's so rare. Very few people know about these
This
varieties.
could be the only blend of its kind on the planet right now.
So how did you get access to Claret?
I freaked out one day when somebody told me Martian Vineyard had some planted. And I thought, I was thinking I might not see Claret in my lifetime, right? So then I found out, lo and behold, Martian's got some. I called them, I said, could you part with a ton of the Claret? And they're like, yeah. So sure enough, I put the juice in a barrel, I ferment it, and there's always that moment, you know, you're walking past it, you're so curious, right? It's the first Claret I've ever made. What's that smell like? And you go past it, you put your ear on the barrel, oh, it's still fermenting. And then tomorrow, you walk past and go, it's still hissing, it's still fermenting. And then you go up to it and say, it's silent, it's done. And you know, if you grab your thief, there's gonna be a couple inches on the surface that are clear, where the yeast is starting to fall out. Sure enough, I grab my thief, I put some in a glass, and I smell it, and I'm just like, why does nobody care about this grape? So that's the idea behind galvanized synergy. It's the idea of using the development of the county viticulturally to try to take synergy of the varieties in the glass of the blend, take synergy to the next level. So I'm the galvanizer, right?
Yeah, you are.
And the synergy is right there. So what I'm doing in the vineyard, I started off this year with about 1,000 oak trees in my nursery, and we planted about half of those to this point, and the other half will be going in. Hopefully we can get them in before harvest.
So you're reforesting, and I heard about this butterfly habitat that you're building as well.
Yes.
Tell me about
So
that.
as part of agroaesthetics, which is the overall concept, the idea of treating your agricultural domain as a piece of art, you know, the 100-acre canvas. And around the forest, we are also studying different species of flowers and milkweeds. The idea being we can paint a hillside with color if we can find a flower indigenous or close to that likes the soil, likes the climate, kind of like, you know, grapes. You know, if you're going to make great wine, you want that variety to be suited to the soil and the climate of where it's planted. Looking for flowers that have extended bloom, they smell great, and they attract butterflies. And then we'll lace into the different colors of flowers, we'll lace all these milkweeds, which is, of course, what butterflies like to feed and reproduce.
You know, you and I have been in this industry long enough to know you're one of the longest running wineries in the county of Santa Barbara. And your tasting room is located out in between Buellton and Lompoc, roughly halfway, I would say, on Highway 246.
Yeah, right in the middle on Highway 246.
And that was where the original vineyard was, and you built a winery. And I was there when you had your family living in the winery, and there was couches and, you know, between the tanks, and your kitchen was there. You were cooking lunch for the team. And so you've really seen this place evolve. And now I understand Lisa, your wife, has added on this spectacular tasting room experience with amazing merchandise.
She's just a genius when it comes to creating a retail atmosphere or merchandising things. And so when we cut our production down a few years ago, it gave us back one of our warehouses, a 5,000 square foot warehouse. and we gave Lisa the keys, and she's turned it into the most spectacular tasting room on the planet. Vintage clothing, vinyl, music, color, antiques, great wines. You know, all these little vignettes and areas where you can easily spend an afternoon just checking stuff out and chilling, and
I have a feeling my wife would love it there.
bring her out. She'll dig it. Now I'm at a point with what's happened in Santa Barbara County overall, and the development that's popped up now from end to end, the Happy Canyon, the Lisos Canyon, the Los Alamos area, Los Olivos, it's just exploded. And so there's so many opportunities, and there's new varieties. I feel like I'm starting all over again in some ways. But now I've got just enough wisdom to be dangerous. But it's nice to, you know, when you see something new, your gut tells you what you should do with it and where you should go with it. So I really feel good about the point that I'm at, where it took me 10 years before I felt like I could really make good wine, you know, consistently. 20 years in, I felt like, okay, now I think I see the big picture. I can stylize things. I really know how I want to express myself as a craftsman. And now, you know, 30 years in, now it's like, okay, yeah, we're pretty good at this. And now what else is out there?
One of the things I love about the wine business is the fact that it is such a scarce product. You can't just replicate it anywhere. And I think that's what gives us our unique proposition in the marketplace in terms of the terroir theory. You know, you can't replicate that anywhere else on earth. And, you know, we get one crop a year. We can't, you know, it's not like barley or hops where you can grow it all year. You
Call it in, yeah.
Right? And so that's why I think our story is so attractive to people, is that it is unique, it is rare, and so much passion and love goes into creating it.
Yep. Every fall, you just got to get in the batter's box.
Like I said, we're kids in a candy store.
Yeah.
And we're very blessed to be in Santa Barbara wine country, and I'm really delighted to share it with you, Brian.
Cheers.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
My name is Brian Rice. I'm a third-generation wine grower, and I've been making wine for over 2 decades here in Santa Barbara wine country. It's more than a job. It's a calling. Join me as I talk to my fellow winemakers in a series that is a candid conversation between winemakers discussing their wines, their craft, and their lives over 2 glasses of wine.
Hi, I'm Brian Rice, and welcome to 2 Glasses In. I'm here with winemaker Doug Marjoram, a pioneer in Santa Barbara County wine country. Welcome to the show, Doug.
Thank you. Good to be here.
I'm honored to have you because I have to say, I really do consider you one of the pioneers of Santa Barbara wine country. Not to make you feel like I'm aging you in any way, but you were there in the foundation, or the coming of age, I would say, of Santa Barbara wine country.
Yeah.
You've seen the beginnings back when we were 5, 6 wineries.
Yep.
And now we're over 200. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, it's been incredible.
Tell me about how you discovered wine and ended up in wine country here.
Oh, parents took us on the European vacation. I was 14 years old. But then, right off the bat, we drove down south and we went down to the Rhone Valley. We started going to wineries. And one of the first places we went was Clos du Pape, and went down into the cellars of Clos du Pape, and they gave me a tasse de vin, which is how you used to drink wine, taste wine. The winemaker had his pipette, and he was taking wine out of the pipette with great flourish and putting it into my little tastavan, teaching us how to taste it. It's this dark cellar, it's mold everywhere, and I'd really not had alcohol.
Really? So you knew what you were tasting, or you were just discovering?
That was my first taste, but luckily everyone has their light bulb wine. They're all of a sudden going about life, and all of a sudden they taste wine and they're like, wait a minute, I'm into this, or I like this, so then in high school and college, I was always the guy when I was working in restaurants that knew more about wine than anybody else. So I wanted to, after I graduated from college, I'd worked in restaurants either as a cook or as a server, going all the way through college. And then when I graduated, I told my father, I said, I want to open this little cafe and serve wines by the glass. And he's like, no, it's a stupid idea. And wine by the glass, you can't make any money. You should open a bar. You could put in, 4 ounces of tonic and an ounce of gin, and you can sell it for a lot of money. But wine is expensive. You open a bottle and you're pouring expensive product. You can't make any money. But then he met a guy who owned the Wine Cask, which was a bottle shop. And he said, your son should put his wine bar next to my bottle shop, and they would be very complementary. It turns out they were going out of business. So we bought the entire bottle shop, including the inventory, and what it turns out to be the most important part of it, the lease. We took over the whole business for $25,000.
Right at the heart of downtown.
Right in the heart
Barbara.
of downtown, which was just then coalescing around that part of town. And 40 different wines by the glass. People had no idea about the by the glass thing. There was only one other place in California that was serving premium wine by the glass.
Really?
The London Wine Bar up in San Francisco. We were the second to do it. We had a whole wine preservation system, which we just dispersed the wine.
That's amazing. You're a pioneer in the wine by the glass.
Yeah,
movement.
before that it was Burgundy, Chablis, and Rosé.
Unbelievable.
That's what you got in a restaurant. So we really were trying to get people to try these wines, and then they could go to the bottle shop and buy them, which was a nice complementary good. Private label wine. Yes?
Yes, sir.
Tell me about this Vin Gris.
So, part of the whole reason that Barden came about was because Eric got hired at Sanford and Benedict. And we just moved the winery to Buellton. We're looking out the window at Santa Rita Hills. Just the whole thing we got to make Santa Rita Hills wines. And so, but we didn't want to make them under Marjoram because it's such a departure to what Marjoram was doing. And so Barden was my middle name. So we put it under the Barden label. So all the Santa Rita Hills stuff is under Barden. Yeah, this is Sanford and Benedict Vin Gris.
Which is really hard to get access to.
There's a queue.
Yeah.
We jumped in front of that line.
Tell me about your kind of philosophy on rosé.
Well, so we changed the whole philosophy in 2012. Instead of making Taval style Saignée rosé, heavier, higher alcohol, to making a press rosé, and that's
less skin contact,
yeah,
a little
just
lighter,
no skin
more
contact at all.
Provençal.
Yeah, just right to the press, very Provençal style.
And having been a wine merchant before, I mean, you've tasted the world of rosé, I'm sure. It's funny that you're a California winemaker, but you tend to prefer old world style.
Yeah. I got sort of busted on that because, you go to some of these markets, you go to New York, and you go in these restaurants and they're like, oh, I'm sorry, we only carry old world wines. And you're like, the world was created all at the same time. There's not a new world and an old world. And when's the last time you were in France? They're like, well, we've never been there. It's like, well, they are way more new world than we are actually. We've embraced old world techniques of, open top fermentations, hand punch down, where they're doing everything pump over, everything stainless.
Yeah, they love the technology.
Yeah, they love the technology. And so
toys.
I just don't get this old world, new world, but there's a whole group of somms and wine professionals who will only buy old world wines, and you're like an American and you're discriminated against. Imagine going to Paris and going to a restaurant like, we only carry American wines. We don't want to get any of these wines from France. And so they won't even taste your wine.
Actually, that might be a good experiment.
Yeah, well, I think there's actually a few restaurants now in Paris who are focusing on American wines, which is really cool. The whole gist of it is we are making as good at wines as any place in the world. Obviously, they don't taste exactly the same because they're from a different part of the world, but they have good and high qualities that are within their own rights.
And that's what we love about wine, right?
Yeah.
The fact that it's really site specific and capturing the essence of that site in the bottle for our consumers.
Is that someone finally sent me a little note on Facebook saying, hey, Doug, you might want to check your delectable page. You know what delectable is?
Of course. It's
What
almost
they
like
said.
a Yelp for wine.
Yeah,
right?
it's like a Yelp for wine. And he's like, why does he want me to check my my Yelp, my delectable app? And then I go through it, and every single wine I've posted is French or Italian or German or Austrian.
What's wrong with you? You're drinking
I know.
wines from other countries.
Well, I tend to not post the stuff I drink locally just because those are just, wines.
Everyday wines,
everyday
right?
wines.
Yeah.
So now I've made a real effort to post stellar, great wines
Yeah.
I've had from,
Yeah.
people around here or in California in general. I think we're booming. I think that's sort of why we all are such friends and colleagues, and we all work together. We are in competition to some degree, but we all feel like we're together,
Is that why you're such a proponent of the Santa Barbara Wine Country brand as opposed to just like drilling down on your AVA specifically?
Well, I make Los Olivos, Santa Rita Hills, and Happy Canyon, so I'm definitely focused on San Ynez Valley, which you are too, obviously.
Absolutely. And I always tell people, the San Ynez Valley is really the heart of Santa Barbara wine country because
really
we are the epicenter and it is a very large AVA. It encompasses many different sub-appellations as well. So tell me about your vineyards and how you farm.
We have one estate vineyard, which is on Alamo Pintado Road. It's the old Honey Vineyard. Honey was planted by Milt Honey to all Italian varietals about 13 years ago, with great ambition and great drive, and working with Steve Clifton to really promote Italian varietals grown in Santa Barbara County.
Grafted over and now
The
you're...
entire vineyard, we grafted everything over. It's all now 10 grape varieties that are in M5 White, Grenache Blanc, Marsanne, Roussanne, Viognier, and Picpoul Blanc, and the 5 that are in M5 Red, which is Grenache, Syrah, Mourvèdre, Cunoise, and Cinsault. And then the whole hillsides where that Sangiovese was, that was so spectacular, are planted to 5 different clones of Syrah, own-rooted, co-planted with Viognier, three of the blocks, and then a half acre of Mourvèdre and a half acre of hillside Grenache.
So
and
do you
it's been
have
a game changer.
I'm trying to. Was that all 13 varieties of the Rhone? Or
Well, no, we
not-
have 10.
10,
but
right?
I think there's even more than 13. But we're missing Claret and Beaubourg Blanc and
Right.
a couple of other ones. No, we're pretty well covered on
that's great.
on the Rhone varietals. So here we have the M5 Red, which we now say M5 Red because we now make M5 White. It is a blend of primarily Grenache, blended with Syrah, Mourvèdre, Cunoise, and Cinsault. And it's primarily from the estate, but we do buy grapes for it. The white is all estate.
And you don't sneak any white wine in here.
I do, actually.
Ah.
But I'm not going to change the name to M6. 3 out of the 5 blocks of the estate Syrah are co-planted to Viognier.
Okay.
So they all have Viognier in them. And we have
Co-fermented or?
Co-fermented. I think that's the only reason to do it.
Sure.
The reason you co-ferment with white wine grapes is they have enzymes that are separate from the red grapes that help set color, and they add aromatics. But just adding Viognier or another white grape to a red wine doesn't really fit the bill.
Just dilutes it.
Yeah. So we have estate Viognier too, so we could also add Viognier. But the 3 blocks are planted to 5% Viognier, so it's red, white.
Just like
red,
Côte
red,
Rôtie.
red. Just exactly right. And so it doesn't matter the ripeness level for the white, we just add it no matter what.
And you decided to do Cunoise and Cinsault, wines that most people have no idea A, how to say, or B, where they come from, but
it gives it this incredible complexity in the nose. We see consumers even doing that. They're just,
Right, it's really floral.
Yeah, it's got a lot of base fruit, especially for the Grenache. It's Grenache based, and then you get the little different interesting aromatics of the briar, from the Cinsault, and then from the very fruity watermelon candy from the Cunoise, and the nice earthiness of the Mourvèdre. And so our fermentations are very, very long. So we get long, cool, low extraction, hand punch down fermentations, and we actually press before. We press at 1 brix. Press sweet into barrel.
Okay.
We let primary and secondary happen in each individual barrel. This is like 120 barrels.
Wow.
And you're letting each barrel go through malolactic on its own.
Okay, that seems like a lot of work.
It's a
Why
huge
do
amount of
you
work.
do that?
I'm not opposed to potassium metabisulfite, but I'm allergic to it. And so if I get a hit of sulfur, I get a sinus infection almost immediately. So all the wines are extremely low in sulfur. So we do preservation through lees, which are natural antioxidants. So if you go in dirty into barrel, it has quite a bit of lees in it. Just trying to figure out ways of not using sulfur in the wine and not having to rack it. So we never rack any of the reds until we bottle.
What a great adaptation.
It works good, and the wines, I believe that sulfur I don't think it helps wines age at all, and I think the downfall of aging American wines has been the overuse of sulfites. That it's a natural antioxidant, but it has the life of it goes
right,
just crashes right away.
You have to keep using more and more.
You have to keep using more and more. So we don't use hardly any, but I could grab an 01 of this wine and it's just as fresh and bright as the 17 is. If someone says, how long should I age your wine? I say, don't drink them and buy more. It's 5 to 15 years.
I always recommend buying a case. If you really like a wine, buy a case of it because you can open a bottle a year for 12 years.
Right.
And if you get to that year where you're like, it's just not quite as good as the
Then
year
drink it
before, then you give it away or drink it all.
Yeah.
So
that's a good, that's the other one I tell people is they said, I never save wine. I said, buy more wine than you can possibly drink. And then you will end up saving it because you can't drink all that wine.
Right, and you get to see the bell-shaped curve of a wine, obviously, if you're tasting a wine, the same wine every year. To me, that's really getting to know a wine.
I agree.
Yeah. So this is delicious. What price point and availability on this?
It's $28. It's available in select markets nationally.
So it's hard to find, but you can seek it out on the website, and the best place to drink it would be at your tasting room.
Yeah. In 2012, we moved to Buellton and opened our own space with all new equipment and tanks and better drains and the whole schmeal. Barrel room space, and then we have a warehouse space over there, and it runs very efficiently. But the biggest news we've had is opening these 2 new tasting rooms in downtown Santa Barbara. So we moved Marjoram to the Hotel California, which is right by the beach.
Oh, that's nice.
And this beautiful 2-story tasting room.
Yeah, it's gorgeous.
And then the old Marjoram tasting room, which was in El Paseo, is now the Barden tasting room. And so we really expanded the Barden offering, and we remodeled that tasting room completely, and it's beautiful.
And you have a great palate.
I'm a big believer in thesaurus.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Look for other ways to describe fruity.
Since we're on that topic, just as a segue here, when you describe wines, is it dangerous to say this wine tastes like tar or asphalt or cat piss?
No. If they do, they do. I mean, Sauvignon Blanc is cat piss all the time. It seems like tar. I think it's actually a positive element. I like tar as a positive thing.
Does it scare consumers away though when you hear?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I think all those adjectives, like you say blueberries or something like that, and people actually say, "Did you put blueberries in it?"
Yeah, right.
No, we didn't put blueberries. That's just a manifestation of the aromatics from the grape. And people really didn't know Santa Barbara County at all, and didn't understand it. And the whole story, which we still tell today, it's one of the coldest growing climates. We have the transverse mountain range, all the things we say every day when we're out promoting.
You were helping to write that narrative back in the days.
We had to. It was something you have to explain because you think of Santa Barbara, you think of beach, bathing suits, and bougainvillea and oranges, but
American Riviera.
Right. So obviously, the soil sets, certainly in Santa Rita Hills and in Happy Canyon, are super low nutrient soils, and so the quality of the grapes is quite high. Here in the Los Olivos district in Ballard, certainly I think the Rhone varietals seem to be the thing that are colder climate.
But there are these little mesoclimates, these little pockets, depending on altitude, or the elevation, and these little swaths of fog that kind of come up and they're channeled along the San Ynez River. So we get a cold pocket down here too. But it's these bizarre swings. I mean, we'll have a 100-degree day and a 40-degree night.
Yeah, that's one of the selling points about Santa Barbara County is the diurnals, the temperature between day and night. That 40-degree swing means that the grapes don't ripen as quickly as they do in some of the other areas where it's warm. I always say it's t-shirt, shirt, sweater, vest, hat, and then you take those all off, then you put them all back on again.
That's right.
Depending on the time of day.
That's right.
When you go to Bordeaux and you're going from chateau to chateau to chateau, the differences in the winemaking is so minute. They all have their whole regimen out there, and they show it to you. We pick at this bricks, we ferment at this temperature, we put in this tank, we pump over this many times a day, and there's not much differences in it. Here, I think a lot of us are getting to the same place in a lot of different ways. It's the Wild West. I mean, there's no rules. I think what I really appreciate is a lot of the winemaking is very, very different and somewhat avant-garde, and people have different opinions about what their final goal is going to be. But all in all, the quality level of the entire region is quite high. Wine that are not too far out there.
Well, I've learned a lot about not only you, but your winemaking style today, and I really appreciate having you on this
Cheers.
show.
Sounds good
Thanks
to
for
be here.
spending your time
Yeah.
with me.
Cheers.
My name is Brian Rice. I'm a third-generation wine grower, and I've been making wine for over 2 decades here in Santa Barbara wine country. It's more than a job. It's a calling. Join me as I talk to my fellow winemakers in a series that is a candid conversation between winemakers discussing their wines, their craft, and their lives over 2 glasses of wine.
So on that note, why don't I introduce, I'm here with Jill Russell from Cambria Winery. She's the winemaker there for the past 2 years. And I'm Brian Rice, your host. Thank you for joining me
Thanks
to
for having me. It's
discuss your
beautiful.
wines.
Yeah.
This is going to be very interesting to me because I come from a very small family boutique winery experience for the last quarter century, and you guys have been around for about as long. Kendall Jackson purchased the Tepisque bench and started Cambria Winery many years before us. And so I've seen that vineyard blossom and become internationally acclaimed thanks to their family. And they really had vision as far as running a larger wine business and allowing winemakers at each site to have their own autonomy and their own creative capacity to make wines, craft wines from the site. Tell me about that.
Pretty special coming in and thinking, okay, I'm part of something bigger, but actually it's a family there. So these cellar guys that have been there 25 years, 20 years, they really do care for Barbara and the daughters, Julia and Catherine. It's pretty special that she just wants you to make the best wine and really show off the estate that is really near and dear to their heart.
So I remember my first taste of wine. It was so good, and I actually switched from drinking beer to specifically Zinfandel. I fell in love with Zin. Tell me about your first wine, and did that inspire you to get into the wine business?
Yeah, so my first wine was Sangiovese, randomly. What I fell in love with was everything about wine, the food, the beauty of the vineyard. I knew I wanted to get into wine. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a vineyard manager when I stepped into Cal Poly, so it was viticulture focused. And I worked in the vineyard and I realized I don't want to be hot and dusty. So then I switched to the wine making, and at Cal Poly they make you take a quarter off and you work in a winery. I just fell in love with it. I actually stayed working nights stirring barrels just while I went to school, just because I was in love with the smells and in love with everything about it. And I know the vineyard, it all starts in the vineyard. I just didn't want to be hot in the vineyard. I don't mind working hard in the cold winery though. Okay, so today I brought to share with you, it's pretty fun because it's our Catherine's Vineyard Chardonnay. So what we're really known for, I wanted to bring my 2017. I was there to help blend and bottle 2016, but 17 is the start to finish, my beginning to end. A big portion of it is from our old vines, so about 80% planted in 70 and 71. And when you come there, that's really special for us.
That's
there.
a year after I was born.
Yeah, these vines are really pretty old, and for a winemaker to walk into a situation and have these available to me is pretty awesome. Because usually you're seeking out those old vines, and Cambria, we have them there.
Absolutely. So this is the Catherine's Vineyard. What
Yeah.
vintage?
2017.
Okay, 2017. And is it 100% barrel?
So because I wanted to get to know the blocks, I would bring in blocks separately or bring them down to barrels, half, and then half stainless. So it's about 40% stainless steel fermentation and 60% barrel. So we've been known as classically barrel fermented Chardonnay. Denise, who has been the winemaker for 20 years, she's now the general manager. She started doing stainless in 15. So then we just kind of been doing a little bit. And really, I was just trying to get to know the block, so seeing them 2 different fermentations. But I think the stainless steel portion still goes to neutral oak barrels and still gets stirred for the body.
Okay, got it. I'm a big fan of the combination of stainless steel blended with the oak, fermented styles to kind of get that mouthfeel and richness from the barrel fermented, but the crispness from the stainless steel.
Yeah, me too.
And getting that blend is something you do at the very end, which you got to be a part of, right?
Every winemaker says, oh, it starts in the vineyard, which it is our own vineyard. So having estate grown, produced, and bottled is really special to have total control.
I'm really picking up some nice tropical notes and a little bit of actually mango. I don't know if you're getting that.
Yeah, and that's something that we talk about a lot at the bench, having this tropical note. I mean, the acid is there too, but different areas of the vineyard sometimes bring the pear or the citrus, and that is true. Like this exuberant tropical fruit.
Oh, it's delicious. Well done. So you like making Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. Have you ever dabbled in any other varieties?
A little bit. So I made sure to work for some great winemakers, and they were always Pinot Noir and Chardonnay focused. But it was fun that they always had some kind of client they'd make wine for. So I got to make Paso Cab and then Happy Canyon Cabernet, Syrah. So a little bit of everything, but always majority was Chardonnay and Pinot. You can find a lot of places. It's about 44,000 cases. And I think it's $22, $25.
Okay. So it's a really great price.
Yeah, I sometimes am blown away when I'm pouring the wine for people and then they're like, price. I'm like, oh yeah, but it's so...
Yeah,
for being a state and a single vineyard wine, I think it's a really good price point.
I mean, this smells like a $40 Chardonnay to me.
Thank you.
So,
yeah, I know. I get surprised sometimes. I'm like,
Cambria is being really responsible with their price points, in my opinion.
I'm focused in Santa Maria, but I do feel connected to the whole region. Living in Los Alamos is a small little town, but it's surrounded by vineyards, and you could tell there was something different about this fruit, and that always intrigued me. And just tasting some of our friends' wines from Santa Barbara, I was always triggered into what's going on.
How much say do you have in the wine growing aspect of the business in terms of, a lot of people believe you really make wine in the vineyard. And so when you're making decisions out in the vineyard, you're affecting what you're going to receive in the cellar.
Actually, Matt Mahoney, our vineyard manager, his office is right across from me, which I think that's for a reason, so that we're constantly talking and going out to different blocks. So even just pruning. So we can stand between 4 different blocks, and each block is being pruned differently for different reasons. And I think that's good. Instead of just sweeping across the whole vineyard and saying we're doing this on everything, we have a say. And then when it comes to leafing, I'm going out, okay, can we do a little bit more on this morning side? I think what makes Cambria special is the estate grown, produced, and bottled. So from start to finish, having that total control, winery in the middle of the vineyard. The vineyard has so much history there, just with the different, these old vines that tell a story in itself. So we even do certain bottlings that showcase those old vines. We have a Clone 4 Chardonnay and a Clone 4 Pinot. The devotion that the family has to continue the legacy of the vineyard and the winery, just kind of all the precision farming and all the technology. Huge in sustainability. I think everyone is working on that. The solar panels, not just in the vineyard, but in the winery. I think sustainability is also, workers loving their job. So making it a great place to work. If you're happy and like your job, you're going to make great wines.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Always a lot of work in the wine business. People don't realize how much,
it's not that
love,
glamorous.
I'd like to say, goes into it. It's a truly passionate business.
So this is our 2016 Julia's Vineyard Pinot Noir. And I wanted to bring this because Julia and Catherine, they're daughters of our proprietor, Barbara, and the Pinot is named after Julia, and the Chardonnay is named after Catherine.
Oh, okay.
So that's where the single vineyard names come in, and then when you come to our tasting room, we have 5 different Chardonnays, 9 different Pinots, different clones, different blocks that we like to showcase. But this is kind of both blends of our estate. It sounds like it's one vineyard, but when you go out to the estate, everyone knows all the different blocks are really like their own vineyards with these different soil types and different clones. So that's all coming in separately and fermented separately.
I had the privilege of trying these wines in the early 90s, and it smells exactly the same.
It smells like Julia's.
Yeah,
huh?
it's so distinctive, and I just love cool climate Pinot Noir coming from Santa Maria, and you really are the pioneers.
The Chardonnay and Pinot Noir really thrives in that cool climate area, the fog and the wind. And we talk about the east-west mountain range. When you come there, we really like to point out, like, there's the ocean, and this is, sometimes it's dangerous for me to go to work and then the sun comes out and that wind really cools things down. There's a lot of texture in this wine. Something we really love is that we get more than just fruit. You said it smells like Santa Barbara, Santa Maria.
Mm-hmm.
There's a savory spice to it.
Mm-hmm.
Even other winemakers that source from Julia's, you're tasting it and there you can taste Julia's.
Absolutely. What's your philosophy on oak
Yeah,
aging?
barrels, I think for a winemaker is so fun because it's a lot of, you're doing a lot of work in the vineyard, especially Pinot Noir needs to be touched so many times. But barrels are so fascinating to me. We're lucky that we have a partnership with World Cooperage, and we have a stave mill in France. So I like to take different barrel coopers and toasts and really try to match things. But it's about 20% new oak.
Okay.
I like oak, so I like what it does to Chardonnay and Pinot. I'm not afraid of it. I do want to just have it add something to the wine. I don't want it to be all about the oak, for sure.
And with Pinot Noir, there's different philosophies on length of aging in barrel. I know some people like to go 2 to 3 years. What's your...
This wine, we only do about 8 to 10 months. So the idea is it is a nice by the glass Pinot, easy drinking, good with food. But we do have some reserve wines that we will hold through harvest and do 14, 16 month aging. And that we also do barrel fermentation. So we take heads off new barrels. I've heard about this, like Cambria does this, and I've done it at other wineries. And we do it to a lot of barrels. So our guys know how to take the heads off easily.
Really?
We actually destem into brand new oak barrels. So that's actually being 100% new oak, but we age back into those barrels. So
Really?
we drain and press back in. So it's kind of getting like twice used. So it's really well integrated, but I think that longer aging time helps integrate that oak.
Way to maximize the economics of the barrel. That's
Yeah.
really interesting. I've never heard of that before. So tell me, where can people find your wines?
So we have the tasting room there, open every day. We have some great people that have been, just like the cellar crew's been there forever. They've been there forever. People come in probably to just hang out with them because they're so lovely, and to taste the wonderful wines. And when you go there, I've talked about, these are kind of our main wines, the Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, and we have multiple different Pinots, multiple Chardonnays, but what's fun is we also do a Viognier and Syrah. And talking about the Tepesquet bench, we kept those vineyards as that name. So it's Tepesquet Vineyard, Viognier, and Syrah. We have 7 acres of each, and it's fun for me to be able to, Chardonnay and Pinot are in my heart, I love them, but it's fun to be able to work with these varieties, especially Syrah. I feel like winemakers just love Syrah, love drinking it, love making it.
What's your takeaway when you go to dinner? Is there a particular wine that you like to take? Or actually, better yet, I've heard you like marrying Chardonnay with steak. You got to tell me that story.
Oh yeah. So really, I just love Chardonnay with anything and everything, and I think it really hurts my heart when people say they don't like Chardonnay. But Chardonnay can be so many different things, so if you just give it a chance. So I try to pair that with everything, yeah. So when we're barbecuing outside, Chardonnay all the way, yeah.
I have to tell you a story that I tell a lot of my friends. Wine is very subjective, and a lot of it has to do with the experience around the wine. And so it doesn't necessarily need to be a $60 or $80 bottle of wine to blow your mind. I had a great experience with one of my best man in my wedding. Before I was married, we were at Malibu Beach, and we only had 20 bucks in our pocket. We had just been playing volleyball all day. And he said, hey, let's go get some swordfish and we'll just grill it out here on the beach at the park. And so we went to Vaughn's and we picked up a bottle of Kendall Jackson Chardonnay for $9.99, I believe it was. And then we bought a swordfish fillet. And we went out to the park and we just sat there and we opened a bottle and just shared the bottle. I mean, we passed literally the bottle back and forth.
No cups, no plastic cups.
No. The swordfish tasted so good, and the wine with the swordfish and the sunset and the conversation was just mind-blowing. And I always tell people that was one of my all-time favorite wine experiences. So it really comes down to a combination of obviously good wine. It's got to be good wine, but it also has to be a great experience.
Yeah, the experience I think is a lot to do with it, and the energy in the wine, the energy in the place, what's going on around you. It isn't just this glass of wine. So
Exactly.
yeah.
Well, Jill, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you so much for
Thank you for
spending
having me. This is so
afternoon with
fun.
me.
Cheers.
My name is Brian Rice. I'm a third-generation wine grower, and I've been making wine for over 2 decades here in Santa Barbara wine country. It's more than a job. It's a calling. Join me as I talk to my fellow winemakers in a series that is a candid conversation between winemakers discussing their wines, their craft, and their lives over 2 glasses of wine.
My name's Brian Rice, and welcome to Two Glasses In. I'm sitting here with world famous Michael Larner, who's the winemaker and viticulturist for his Larner family estate. I've had the privilege of knowing you since you got here into the valley, and it's great, you know, being a part of this community with you, Michael. But I will say it's been a real pleasure watching your vineyards grow and develop into an internationally acclaimed vineyard site in Santa Barbara. Your vineyard's now, how old is it now?
This is for us. This is a great vintage. This is our 20th anniversary of growing grapes and our 10th anniversary of making wine.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
so
So this is a
pretty
huge
monumental,
milestone
yeah.
for you too.
Yeah.
I understand you were a geologist before you got into viticulture.
Yeah.
Why don't you tell me a little bit about geology? Or do you geek out on it still?
Yeah, no, it's so before I went into the whole world of wine, born and raised in Los Angeles, my father was a cinematographer, my mother was a business owner. Their dream, it was their baby, was to eventually have a little vineyard. And so they started taking trips, and eventually from Los Angeles to here, it's a 2-hour drive, they plopped themselves down here. And I was just being myself, being a geologist, working in Colorado as a geotech engineer, a lot of engineering stuff. And I get this phone call from the folks like, hey, we're gonna buy a ranch. We need some muscle. Are you in? I'm like, okay, you know, I trust you guys. You raised me pretty well. And fell in love with everything. Fell in love with the business, not just the winemaking, but the sales part, the stories that are told.
Well, and of course the geology of it. Geology is such an integral part of
And that
our
was
science.
that was, sorry to use the pun, the foundation for me was like, wow, I understand a lot of this. I understand the vineyard differentiation. You know, but then also pulling on my historical context. As a kid, I lived in Italy for 5 years. I was exposed to wine. It was on the dinner table. I mean, in America, we have salt, pepper, and ketchup. Yeah. And in Italy, it's salt, pepper, and wine, right? I mean, we need to make that transformation.
Couldn't agree more.
That intricacy of how more complex the plot got is probably what gets you more and more in love with the business.
Yeah.
Because all of a sudden you realize I have to be a jack of all trades. I have to be able to understand not just from grape to glass, but from getting that glass into your hand. And whether that's you coming to visit us, where you're on my turf, or me trying to get into your turf, into a restaurant or do a wine tasting at a wine bar, it really becomes a really fascinating dynamic for a winemaker, because especially like you and I, we're business owners, we are the face of the brand, so we have to do a lot of that footwork ourselves. And so the funny thing about being a geologist is you're outdoors. You love being outdoors, and you don't want to be stuck in a lab coat doing chemical reactions. So the gregarious nature of being a geologist who wants to be outdoors was an easy transformation for me to get into wine. And I think building upon that, was experiences working locally, working at Harvest at Babcock. We call it the University of Babcock. Brian's an amazing teacher. It was great to be working with a neighbor. So I went to UC Davis, got a master's of viticulture enology. So that's great. Now I just dissected wine, and it became a little bit unromantic for a moment, because you're like, wow, I understand all the chemicals, but how does this all translate to making wine?
So you got the theoretical education.
I got the theory, and I said, you know what? I'm going old world. So I went to France and worked for Gigal. I worked for Antinori in Tuscany. So I set these internships up, focusing on producers that are Syrah based, but at the same time world renowned, because I know that they have a style that's unique and recognizable.
And they're not necessarily going off textbook, are they?
No, and that's the amazing thing when you work for a company like that, because you walk in and you're slinging your guns, telling everybody you're so smart, you came from Davis, here's what you should do, and they look at you like, whatever. You know, we've been doing this for thousands of years, right? So you realize there's a sort of, you know, medium where you walk in and you're like, okay, I'm going to learn from you. So this is our 2017 Estate GSM blend. I call it Elemental. Basically, we make this every year. The golden rule within the family is that Grenache must be the dominant player, mainly because we're looking for a wine that is very food friendly and very compatible with multiple dishes on the table. So Grenache has this beautiful ability to bring in like velvet tones, a softness that is really unparalleled by other varietals. But then you also need to balance that sort of soft velvet tones. You also need a little bit more firm mid-body, and that's where Syrah comes into play, and then a little spiciness on the back end from the Mourvedre.
For sure, spicy. Loving this. Do you do whole cluster ferments?
No, so this is all 100% destemmed fruit. It's all aged separately for 2 years, and so all the lots, the picks, everything's aged separately, all neutral barrels. And then at the 2-year mark, we blend them back together. And I'm saying we in this case because I'm the winemaker, but whenever we do blends or sort of look through the wines and sort of classify them, I bring in my winemaking team, which is my wife, sister, and mother. So clearly I'm always right when we talk about stuff. We just kind of, you know, look at the barrels, look at the structure of each wine, and sort of determine where they're going to go, which ones play well together, and that's what ultimately ends up being in the Elemental.
Oh, it's beautiful. Well done. I think you're a smart man for bringing your wife and mother into the process. I do that with my team, my staff as well at Artiste, and it's so much more enjoyable to share the experience of blending with others versus sitting in a lab by yourself, you know, with a graduated cylinder trying to make the world's greatest wine.
So the amazing thing about a blend is like, it's not like there's a holy grail, like, it has to taste like this. No, blends are hedonistic. This is what I want it to taste like. I can go outside the boundaries of wine and play around and tinker with different combinations. So you need that grounding rod. You need those other people to sort of be like, whoa, hang on, Mike, come back in here, because you've got all these great variables, but we want it to be consistent and we want it to taste really flavorful from year after year. So the idea is to have that panel helps you sort of, you know, bring in different aspects. So you, at the end of the day, you're like, yeah, that's still a Larner wine because the Larners voted on it, but it also has some of the unique attributes for that vintage.
I love it.
And when I look at you know, the wines that I make from the estate, Syrah, Grenache, Mourvedre, Viognier, Malvasia, they all have this overlying mineral tone that I don't get in other parts of the world or Santa Barbara County. And I think that's amazing because, you know, as a geologist, I love to think that, oh yeah, you know, there's so much I understand about the soil and there's so much I understand about farming, but as a winemaker, I'll say, you know what, this time the land can speak louder than I do. I'll let the land talk, and that's what we showcase at Larner is proving that soil is unique, and then those signature traces come through in the wine, and so I always get this beautiful minerality. It's so fascinating. It's whetstone. It's almost like a flinty character or something like that you might get in some whites in other regions, but I don't see it in all of your wines. In all the wines I make, there's always something there. Like, hey, there's Larner, there's Ballard Canyon. You know, it's kind of in there. I want to say it's the case for Santa Barbara County, is we're all born from the ocean. We're all born from these marine sediments. And in my vineyard, I see that very well showcased. If you go to the top of my hill at 680 feet elevation, and you flip over a stone, sometimes you'll pick up a rock and you're like, hey, cool, there's a fossilized seashell in here. Other times you'll pick up a rock and find basically like pieces of chalk or chert or something like that. And each one of those stones is telling you a story about where they were formed, which tells you what was going on the land before. So to give you an example, 20 million years ago, our properties were underwater and down by San Diego, and they've been riding up to the north on the south side of San Andreas Fault and basically coming up out of the ocean. And so on the top of my hill, I'll find sandstone with fossilized seashells in them. In the middle of the vineyard, I'll find chalk, just fractured and friable chalk with some sand on top of it. And then as you get to the lower elevations, you'll find chert. And so that fossilized sandstone is basically coastal environment. The chalk is, sort of shallow marine, old coral reefs. And then the chert is deep marine sediment. So all of that is aquatic and was under the ocean, is now sitting at 600 feet elevation. So all of this land came up and is now sitting at this elevation that the vines are so happy growing into, because it's an alkaline soil. They love it. And it sort of tells a fascinating story about Santa Barbara's wine country, that you see it, diatomaceous earth on the west side, serpentine soils on the east side. So you have this wonderful sort of kaleidoscope of marine depositional environments that are all now where we grow our vines in. Our estate Syrah is also aged similar to the Grenache Syrah Mourvedre blend. This is aged 2 years, but now we start to bring in a little bit of new oak. So on this particular vintage, which is 2016, we have about 38% new oak. So roughly 4 out of 10 barrels are brand new French oak barrels. There we go.
I love the sound of that.
So again, aged 2 years, about 40% new oak. This actually is 5 different clonal lots. So basically separate blocks that were all picked separately on a separate day, fermented separately, aged separately, and then put back together at that 2 year mark.
Cheers. Wow, that's a heavy wine. Very big, bold aromas, great color, absolutely dark.
Thank you.
It's coating the walls like paint.
This wine, I think, is sort of like the heart and soul of Larner. It is bold, it is opulent and strong. At the same time, I have to admit that it has a soft side to it. There's a warmth feeling it gives out. And I think that's kind of the style of winemaker that I am. And it's really hard because as winemakers, we find the challenge, how do we make a wine that satisfies so many people? And Syrah is one of the few varieties that represents this happy medium between being on the forefront of bold, but still a little bit refined, so that it's not in that aggressive bold category like Cabernet, Cabernet Franc, Merlot. So if you look at an old geologic map and you see all the different layers on there, on the side there's always this beautiful stratigraphic column. And it shows you the name of the formation, the age of the formation, and it kind of gives you a chronologic event of how these all deposited or formed, whether it's a lava flow or sandstone or something like that. And so that stratigraphic soil column was the crux of what we want to do with the label. So we basically took that and cropped it over multiple wines so that each wine ends up getting a piece of that stratigraphic soil column, which is a unique piece of artwork. So every label will have slightly different soil contexts. And that soil actually speaks a little bit to the wine. So to give you an example, this crop is basically looks like fractured rock, which is perfect for Syrah because it's bold. Mm-hmm. It has some sort of like structure to it, and it's made up of multiple blocks, 5 different clonal selections. So again, you have this fracture pattern. So even though it just looks like a simple stratigraphic piece of column of soil, to me it's so much more because there's pieces in here that indicate what the wine is about.
Showing the site.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's really very clever.
What is going to make these wines showcase the best is when you have dust of the vineyard on your shoes, because you're out there seeing where it's grown, you're out there seeing the context of what it is. And as a geologist, that's perfect because we're always dusty in our dirt. But I mean, the idea of experiencing it firsthand to see it is, I think, the destination that I want to educate people on, to have them come out and experience it. I think it's what Santa Barbara is all about. We offer so much great diversity of climate, diversity of things to do, diversity of excellent restaurants and hotels. So why not make it also a fun experience to come out?
You also opened up a tasting room in Los Olivos. And how's that going?
That's great. I mean, it's funny. I like to call it the most intimate tasting room because square footage wise, it's probably only about 20 square feet. It's very small. It's like a broom closet.
It might be like 3 telephone booths.
Right, exactly. But that's what we need. We need to achieve that intimacy because we are a small family winery. We make 1,400 cases annual production. I always like to say it's a little bit more than I can drink alone. So Los Olivos is a wonderful place to do that. It has tons of tasting rooms, tons of shopping experiences. And in fact, my wife realized that not only did we need to open a tasting room, We also needed to complement something in Los Olivos that seemed like it was fading away, which is retail. And so she created this concept, the Los Olivos General Store. It was basically a modern take on old classic. We took this beautiful old gas station, poured gas, and it was the longest running gas station in California up until like 1997. In the beginning, we didn't think we were going to have a tasting room there, so we actually made that little 3 telephone booth size space my wife's art gallery. And my wife's a very talented artist. She paints using wine. As a winemaker, I would never expect to see so much depth, so much layering from just using wine.
I remember the first days when you were developing the pigments with her.
Yeah.
You were literally building through a chemical process.
Yeah,
I think,
and when I was at Davis, I was like, wait a minute,
Yeah.
let's play with this. So we started shifting the pH of wine, changing it from blue to green to brown. I helped her, and she helped me learn about, the color and the layering. To see her artwork being displayed there was, I was so proud. After a couple of years, I was like, well, we need to start selling some wine. So we opened our little tasting room there and have basically created this little satellite for us to sort of get people exposed to our brand while we're waiting for the big mothership to open on the estate, which, is coming soon. So.
Well, Michael, this has been such a pleasure. I really appreciate having you on the show,
My
and
pleasure.
thank you for sharing your story with us.
Thank you.
Salud.
Salud.
My name is Brian Rice. I'm a third-generation wine grower, and I've been making wine for over 2 decades here in Santa Barbara wine country. It's more than a job. It's a calling. Join me as I talk to my fellow winemakers in a series that is a candid conversation between winemakers discussing their wines, their craft, and their lives over 2 glasses of wine.
Hi, I'm Brian Rice, and we are 2 glasses in with Kathy Joseph, the legendary winemaker from Santa Barbara, and I am so excited to have you here today. I've been enjoying your first Pinot Noir of the day, and it's absolutely stunning, and I can't wait to hear what you have to say about how you got started in the wine business. So tell me about the roots and how you ended up here.
I went to college in Wisconsin at Madison, and I studied microbiology and biochemistry, which was for the purpose of medical school, or the beginnings of what I thought was a career in that direction, and felt young and experimental. And I knew or learned that my background was incredibly applicable to the wine industry. So I actually worked for 6 months in Sonoma at Simi Winery when Zelma Long was there, then started graduate school, and every vintage through graduate school I worked at a different winery, was taken under the wing of the winemakers, and really was on a very elevated learning curve.
Well, for people who don't know, UC Davis is considered to be one of the best schools in the world for enology and viticulture, and you were a graduate there. And
I was basically a Cabernet producer in Napa, and I learned the passion of Pinot Noir, and I learned to taste Pinot Noir, and I was to explore my palate with Pinot Noir. It allowed me to design a company that was strictly based not only around Pinot Noir, but Sauvignon Blanc, 2 unusual varieties at the time that I started.
You were ahead of your time.
They were not stars.
Yeah.
And I wanted my wines to be elegant and place-driven and use the European model of success. And I wanted to kind of scream terroir in Santa Barbara County. And more recently, I've added Gruner Veltliner to the mix of what I make.
Oh, I can't wait to try that.
I think the unique thing about Fiddlehead Cellars is that I'm involved and I'm an owner.
So tell me about the names Fiddlehead and Fiddlesticks.
So I guess when you're starting out a brand, you have to decide what to call yourself. And so the scientist in me kind of came forward, and as I was gardening in my fern bed, I remembered Fiddlehead, what a great word. It's the coiled frond of a fern leaf.
Right.
And it emerges once a year like my new releases, and it evolves into this very elegant plant and easy to say, and you'll never forget it. So Fiddlehead became really core to the brand, and then other names. So Fiddlesticks became the name of the vineyard, kind of as a joke. You know, cheers,
Right,
cheers,
right,
you know,
absolutely.
it was like a discovery. And so the brand has expanded to include one that's a family name called Birdie Baby. It was my mom's pet name for my dad. Doyle is named after my husband, who supports me. Naming is not easy, but they're all very personal and meaningful.
So you've had a lot of experiences along the way.
Yes.
One of them was pretty massive from a marketing perspective, and it was the Sideways movie that came out, and what was
Yeah.
it, 2003 or 4?
4.
My tasting room was packed with people who wanted to come to Sideways country. And you happened to be featured. Your wine was a Sauvignon Blanc,
It was.
was featured in the movie. So
How unique is that in a Pinot Noir movie?
Yeah.
They're talking about my Sauvignon Blanc.
So did that just completely blow up your business, or did it actually have a negative impact?
So I think the impact is maybe a little different from yours. I'm based in Lompoc, a little bit off the beaten path. We became very close friends with the director, Alexander Payne, and we had many of the actors to my vineyard and my winery. It was incredibly memorable on how my wine got into the movie, which was Alexander Payne actually tasted the wine and said, I'm gonna write this into the script.
Perfect.
It was very exciting, and I think it was the greatest thing about Sideways. It gave people permission to drink a variety that they were uncomfortable with and did not understand, and that's Pinot Noir. And they learned the passion, and they learned that they learned how to say Pinot Noir, and they could
Right.
ask for Pinot Noir. It's a little funny because whether you were in the movie or not, you said you were in the movie. The way my brand really took off was through the props person. And the props person loved the wine so much that since then, my wine has been in a whole host of other movies. So Annette Bening is drinking my wine, and the kids are all right.
Oh, that's
and
great.
Entourage featured my Rosé of Pinot Noir. And
Who would have guessed, right? So Kathy, tell me about this 728 Pinot Noir from Fiddlesticks Vineyard. And if you wouldn't mind giving me a sense for where it's located geographically,
Right.
and a little bit about the wine, which I need to pour you some more.
Thank you.
There you go.
Yummy. The Appalachian Santa Rita Hills is so extraordinary for its cool climate, but it has great diversity. And so there's 2 avenues that pass through the Appalachian that has east-west running mountain ranges, highly unique, the only one on the West Coast, entire West Coast for a wine district. And so our temperatures close to the ocean are quite cool, and as you move through the Appalachian, they get a little bit warmer, but within the cool range. We're on the Southern Avenue, which is Santa Rosa Road, and I really felt that our position was so important that I wanted to name a wine after it. So coming from the Midwest, I named it after the mile marker. So starting at mile 0 on Highway 1, you travel exactly 7.28 miles to get to the driveway of Fiddlesticks Vineyard. So it's a place name that the wine is meant to represent the character of the vineyard. And so Sanford and Benedict Vineyard is my neighbor, and I knew the success of those wines by being able to monitor the aging of those wines and taste wines that were planted from grapes, made from grapes that were planted in 1972. You know, low water usage, that were sustainably certified, that could take advantage of the kind of cool climate growing demands of Pinot Noir. So in addition to this wine, there's a whole group of sister wines that are barrel select wines, but it was important that this one, 728, represent the place.
Beautiful. So tell me about when the fruit arrives in the cellar and you're responding to the vintage, not knowing what you're going to receive. Where does that creative excitement come from every harvest for you in the cellar?
Yeah, it's a great, my winery and tasting room are in Lompoc, very near the vineyard. My job during harvest is to decide when to pick and where to pick. And it can be half a ton, it can be 4 tons, 5 tons, and to work with my crew. So we do field sorting 1 bucket at a time in the middle of the night. So we only night harvest because that's the coolest hours of the day, and we can do the least amount of damage to fruit that is ripe and ready to go in this very thin skin variety. I try to make a wine that is layered and silky and will expand the test of time.
Do you know if it's going to be a great vintage when the fruit arrives? Do you taste the grapes and go, oh my God, this is so much better than last year?
I consider it my job to be able to translate the grape into a finished wine. And as a small producer, I get the benefit of making the best wine of the vintage. So I don't make the same decisions every year, but every year must be an extraordinary vintage for maybe a different reason. And so really, if I didn't think it was a good vintage or the fruit wasn't great, I would probably sell it.
I'd like to hear if you could compare for me the differences between real world winemaking in a real winery versus more of the theoretical winemaking in enology at your graduate experience. Would you say you've learned more in the real world, or do you think that the education's really been a huge contributor to your abilities?
So neither is more important, and it's important to not let one stand alone. So I learned why pH is so important in the wine and how it affects microbiological stability and color and acid balance and longevity. So I don't make my wines using the science, it's background information. You might not need the education, but the information is invaluable. And I use it more to problem solve and to avoid problems than I do to drive my winemaking.
So tell me about where you are now. You said you have 99 acres, and maybe you could break down the percentages by varietal for me, but then also how many cases of wine are you making?
Yeah, so I make between 4,000 and 5,000 cases of wine. It's spread across my estate-grown Fiddlesticks Pinot, my Gruner Veltliner, Sauvignon Blanc from Happy Canyon, and my Oregon Pinot, so quite a bit of diversity. The vineyard is huge, and it's huge because I was in an area where I had to purchase a minimum of 100 acres by the ag code. The great thing is that I grow fabulous wine, but I only select about 15% of the vineyard for my own brand, and then I sell to other stellar winemakers, both in Santa Barbara County and up in Napa Valley. We've really gained a wonderful reputation through our growing practices, and a lot of awards to not my wines, but the whole pool of winemakers. So I've learned from not just what I think is right and what my customers want, but what everyone can contribute to make this a special place.
So what's the future of Fiddlehead and Fiddlesticks Vineyard and your future look like? What gets you up in the morning? What are you excited about? What's the next big thing?
Ooh, I kind of live every day at a time because of my involvement. So I don't want to grow bigger because I size my winery where I could have control over what each barrel is doing. I taste every single barrel and determine appropriate blends. And I like to share that as often as I can. In the meantime, I continue to do what I do.
You have been a pioneer in this region, and one of your most notable achievements in assisting our region has been the development of the Santa Rita AVA in 2005. That's a major accomplishment, not only for our AVA, but for you as well, I think, for your vineyard. And I knew that took a group effort, but I understand you were a really important player in the process of getting that approved, as well as Happy Canyon. Happy Canyon, which was further inland, which your Sauvignon Blanc grows in, a warmer climate. You had to delineate between the two climates of the two regions and help develop that AVA as well. And that's a major accomplishment.
Yeah, it's very exciting. I obviously didn't do it solo, but from Happy Canyon, I was probably one of the earliest grape purchasers from vineyards that were developed there on an experimental basis. And to make a Bordeaux-based varietal that is not herbaceous, that is not extreme, that has elegance, that has world-class character, that was what was so exciting. And it transitioned recognition from an area that was, making wines in these districts that I believed in.
So tell me about your tasting room. People would love to go visit you and taste your wines.
We change up our tasting lineup all the time. Even though we make only 3 varietals, you are almost guaranteed tasting something different every time. Tasting room is open on weekends, Saturday and Sunday. My website, fiddleheadcellars.com, has current hours, but also you can book specialty reservations for vineyard tours and barrel tastings through talk.com. And you always get an expanded experience, and I encourage people to do that.
Well, I see about 6 bottles of wine over there from
we have
Fiddlehead, and I'm dying to go open some of those and try some more, because 2 glasses just isn't enough.
So let's carry on.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Brian Rice. I'm a third-generation wine grower, and I've been making wine for over 2 decades here in Santa Barbara wine country. It's more than a job. It's a calling. Join me as I talk to my fellow winemakers in a series that is a candid conversation between winemakers discussing their wines, their craft, and their lives over 2 glasses of wine.
My name is Brian Rice, and welcome to 2 Glasses In. I'm sitting here with a friend and winemaker extraordinaire, Mr. Blair Fox of Fox Cellars Wines. And I'm privileged to have known you since 1999, 2000. But first, tell us about your past and how you ended up falling in love with wine and going to UC Davis and eventually getting to Santa Barbara.
Born and raised in Santa Barbara, and went up to Davis, and I was pre-med, kind of exploratory biology at the time, and so taking all that chemistry, OChem, biochem, genetics, math, calculus, all that crazy stuff. And then I stumbled into my first viticulture class and just fell in love with the grape growing side of it. And from the grape growing side of it, which is viticulture, I figured, I was kind of one of the guys that raised my hand, who's gonna be a grape grower? Because I love being outside, I love that whole side of it. But then I thought, I could grow these amazing grapes and hand them off to somebody that doesn't really know what they're doing. So I should probably take all the enology coursework too. And so I was the first year to graduate with a combined degree in both viticulture and enology. And that was back in '99. I helped Fess Parker for the vintage, and I was very textbook back then, it was very just like, this is how you're supposed to do things.
So it was how you were taught at Davis.
Exactly.
And you used all their formulas and protocols.
Right, yeah. I don't look at a textbook for anything anymore. You know, it's about being in the vineyard and tasting the grapes and being in the winery and smelling, you know, the fermentations and the aromatics and tasting the fermentations and just having that complete understanding of the whole process. I always wanted to go back to Santa Barbara County. I never wanted to be anywhere else. I never had that lure to Napa or any other place in the world. Yeah, coming back home and then really taking over the reins at Fess Parker, and I've been there now for 16 years.
Fess Parker and Marcy were close friends with my parents. We found ourselves here in Santa Barbara mostly because of the Parkers. They had invited us to come up here and really plant vineyards. We'd been friends for many generations, and so we thought we would be selling grapes to the Parkers at some point.
Yeah.
But then we fell in love with winemaking and got the bug, and the next thing you know, we're making wine. And all right, Blair, let's open some wine.
Sounds good.
What do we have here?
Here's Ambush. So this is a 2015 Ambush. This is all from our estate in Los Olivos. And so it's all the red varieties that we grow. So we have Grenache, we have Syrah, we have Petite Syrah, and a little bit of Zinfandel out there.
Oh wow, Zin.
Yeah.
That's really rare in Santa Barbara, right?
So this is just around 50% Grenache, and then the rest come in at Syrah, Petite Syrah, Zinfandel.
Oh, wow.
Zinfandel being the least.
So you'd call this like a classic California style red blend, right?
Sure, yeah.
The Ambush, why the Ambush?
Well, that's Sarah came up with that. So Sarah's my wife, as you well know, and we had this artwork, which Mark, our tasting room sales associate, he did the artwork on this for this label, and it's a fox, and we're just trying to figure out what that fox was about to do. So I proposed the attack, but that came off a little bit too hardcore, I guess, in Sarah's eyes, and so she said ambush. So it's cool because on the back then we put a description of ambush, the definition, and it says a complex, secretly constructed, multi-phase operation planned in great detail and contains the element of total surprise.
That sounds like a winery. It smells amazing. Can you describe for people what you're getting?
Yes, I think at first you get some of the Grenache, like that Bing cherry and that really kind of ripe red fruit. And then Syrah kind of comes into play and adds a little bit of black fruit, some plum. Petite Syrah really adds structure and kind of length and tannin. And then Zinfandel just gives it like a playful, just kind of fruitiness, which Zinfandel kind of adds. So it's cool. And what I do is I basically cherry pick the absolute top barrels from all of the different lots, and then sit around and tinker with a blend. And sometimes it'll take me 20 minutes to figure it out, and sometimes it'll take me 3 days to figure it out. And you know how blending goes. So blending is kind of where the winemaker really has that opportunity to make something that they feel is unique, I think. And I think that's what this wine is for our estate.
What's the residual sugar on this?
It's totally dry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It has a perceivable sweetness to it.
Yeah.
I would imagine the Zin does that. I know
Zin
it does.
probably has a little bit of that. Yeah, and so it's totally dry. It's aged in barrel for 22 months, 100% French oak.
How many cases do you make of this Ambush?
It's about 100.
So
Very
small. People
Yeah.
don't know, when you handcraft a wine that's only 100 cases, that's a commitment to capturing, a really unique flavor profile. It's not necessarily something that's going to go broad market and be in stores around the country. It's like, no, this is something that I'm putting my heart and soul into.
For sure.
And you're only selling it, I imagine, in your tasting room.
Correct.
Yeah. What would you match this with? It's really powerful. Sometimes I feel like really powerful wines can overpower, if you will, the food, but some dishes can stand up to it.
Yeah,
What would
for
you
sure.
pair with
I think most game meats obviously will work well with this. I think lamb, even things like elk. I think you can definitely put a nice big ribeye in front of this wine for sure, and it'll definitely pair very nicely.
Man, you're making me hungry. So tell me about the Fess Parker Winery. Tell me about the differences between your winemaking there versus, say, the winemaking you do for your own wines.
I think, really it's vineyard sourcing, and it's just economy, like we were saying, scale. My wines are just tiny, ultra small. They're all hand punch downs. It's usually myself or my kids or my wife helping me with pigeage or punch downs or whatever needs to happen in the winery. So mine is very much more estate, or I have 6 different vineyards that I use for Blair Fox cellars that are all Syrah.
So in addition to Fess Parker Winery and your own, I understand you also make Epiphany Winery, which I love the name of it. Epiphany's a great name for a winery. Tell me about that. What are the differences between Epiphany and Fess Parker?
Yeah, so the Epiphany name actually came from Eli when he was in Australia and he was tasting GSM, and he was like, we could do this in Santa Barbara County. And so that was his epiphany, and that's when he actually came up with the name and came up with a brand, and it was something for him to kind of step away out from under, the umbrella of Fess Parker and start his own Rhone-based type of winery. And then I kind of started taking over the winemaking at Epiphany in 2005. And it's a very much a Rhone-based program. We have Roussanne and Marsanne and some Syrah, Grenache, Mourvedre, Counoise, and so keeping it all different makes it much more interesting for me. Cool, so this is my 2016 Tierra Alta Vineyard Syrah. And I've been working with Tierra Alta since 2004. This is another kind of favorite in the tasting room, Typically, it's got great like dark fruit characters, but then it'll also have like chocolate and pepper. And this is out in Ballard Canyon. Ballard Canyon, is such a great growing region for Syrah, especially, and that's really what they're hanging their hat on out there. I make 3 different Syrahs from 3 different vineyards in Ballard Canyon.
And Blair, people know you for Rhones, right? That's really your true passion, would you say? I mean, would you say Syrah is your kind of noble grape?
I would say so. I mean, I got out of UC Davis, and that was my final wine marketing class. It was that Syrah was going to be the next red grape to take over Cabernet Sauvignon in popularity. I'm still waiting for that to happen, but we'll see. We'll see if it ever happens. But I just love Syrah. I think it's a great wine, with food. It's a great wine on its own. Where it's grown, you see so many differences, whether it's cool climate characters like super peppery and floral, or then warmer, climate characteristics where it's more like fruit, big ripe fruit, jammy fruit. So in all these areas that I work with, they're all very cool climate, so it's kind of right in between. I work with some out of Santa Rita Hills, which is super cool. And again, you get that real floral, peppery side. And then Ballard Canyon, I think it's a good kind of right in the middle where you get the pepper, but you still get, chocolate and dark fruit and plum and things like that.
Oh, the spiciness on this Syrah is incredible. What's the retail price on this?
This one's $47. Yeah.
Which for most people, that's really out there. I mean, that's a really high price, but what they don't realize is that it's such a small production that it's really scarce, and you only have it available in your tasting room.
Right.
And I think people don't really realize the economies of scale in the wine business. They don't realize when you only make a few hundred cases of something, your cost of making only that amount is really, really high compared to doing thousands of cases.
And super high quality grapes too, so the grape cost is really how I base my pricing usually. And like I said, this vineyard I've been making since 2004, and it just keeps performing well, and as it gets older, it keeps kind of showing different nuance. And I think, when you really look at it, I made just under 100 cases of this wine, and when you look at that production and you look at the scores that I've received with this wine, I think frankly, $47 is probably too low. I should really be charging more, but I do want it to be kind of a bargain. I don't want to price it outside of everybody's budget.
Would you say that it's true kind of across the board for Santa Barbara County that our prices are more in line with reality?
For sure. I think Syrahs and, our high-end red wines from Santa Barbara County that can compete with the best wines in California. They compete with Napa Cab and Napa Syrahs and all these wines that are priced way, triple, quadruple, 5 times as much as the wines for similar quality. You can get a 96-point wine from one critic that's in Santa Barbara County between 30 and 50, and then you go up to Northern California and Napa, that same kind of caliber of wine is going to be 100 to 200, if not more.
Right. I've seen it. It's incredible what they can charge. On that note, I'm going to pour some more of this delicious wine. And I know you make many other different wines with Syrah. What would you say, if you had to choose one, is your default take home for dinner?
I mean, from our estate vineyard, I make a Syrah, which is just something super special. I found this site. We planted it in 2006. I was there for every day of everything in terms of, kind of vineyard maintenance and vineyard operation and everything that happens there, vineyard establishment. I chose which varieties to plant where, how much compost, how much gypsum, all this stuff that we're adding. I mean, and it's a fun wine. I just, like we've been talking about, I'm a Syrah guy. I really started to love Pinot Noir after working for Fess Parker, because I hadn't had a lot of Pinot Noir that I liked before that, and then really understanding that grape has made me a Pinot fan, but still I think Syrah is kind of where I hang my hat.
Well, you may have just stumbled upon Pinot Noir, but you've been highly awarded with 90 plus scoring wines with Pinot Noir, and you've been considered to be winemaker of the year a few times. So obviously the variety isn't really a factor. I mean, you're just an all around good winemaker.
Well, thank you. It's luckily I lucked out, and it makes great wine too. Experience, and understanding your vineyard. I mean, more than anything else, I feel like wine is made in the vineyard. I'm just trying not to screw it up. But on the same token, I do try to put a thumbprint on the wines I make. I think we have a handle on it, but it still isn't easy.
Yeah, and now you're the textbook that you used to read. If you were to go back to UC Davis now, what would you tell the students and advise them as far as the wine industry is concerned?
I would say if you're truly passionate about it and you want it, go for it. Start at the bottom and you need to work your way up just like everybody else. Brian I think you had interviewed him, and he offered me a job back in the day, like right out of
Brian
Davis.
Babcock.
Brian Babcock. And it was for $8 an hour, and I was like, I need to make a little bit more money than that.
But he offered to pay you in wine as well, I'm sure.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
No, but he's actually had amazing people come out of his cellar that have started their own labels and moved on, and I mean he's really had kind of a university of Brian Babcock over there, where I think they get well trained and accomplished, and then they move on and start their own wineries, which is cool.
So it sounds to me like the formula that you might recommend to students is to have grit and to focus on their passion and not worry about anything else, because if they really love it, they will be successful. Right?
Yeah, you got to stick it out.
Well, I'll tell you what, Blair, this has been a pleasure, and I really appreciate you taking the time to come hang out with me and share these 2 glasses of wine, and I'm looking forward to many more.
Awesome. Thanks, Brian. Appreciate it.
Cheers, brother.
Cheers.
My name is Brian Rice. I'm a third-generation wine grower, and I've been making wine for over 2 decades here in Santa Barbara wine country. It's more than a job. It's a calling. Join me as I talk to my fellow winemakers in a series that is a candid conversation between winemakers discussing their wines, their craft, and their lives over 2 glasses of wine.
Hi, I'm Brian Rice. Welcome to 2 Glasses In. I'm here with winemaker Tyler Thomas of Deerberg Star Lane Wineries. And I consider Tyler to be one of the top winemakers in California, if not in the world, in my opinion. I'm fascinated by how you got here to Santa Barbara. We're all very fortunate that you're in our neighborhood. You're elevating Bordeaux's and Burgundy wines for this region because of your experience and your knowledge. Why don't you tell me about maybe your journey and how you got here, and maybe we could start out with your passion for wine, how you discovered it.
All right, I was gonna say, how far back do you want me to go? So my passion for wine really got fed when I was in college, but I know with hindsight it started with just my family background. So my dad's mother was French. So I grew up with family gatherings, especially wine was just something on the table with food. We eat our salads after the meal. Cheese is a dessert course. And so to me, growing up in St. Louis, Missouri in the Midwest, that was what was normal. And so when I got to college, I was studying plant science, botany. We drank a lot of cheap Côte de Rhônes because we had no money. And I remember being so fascinated with the fact that a fruit could produce something that has savory, spicy qualities, and how cool that was. And I should say savory, spicy qualities in it, like that were enjoyable. You know, like
Right, and it's like it feels good too when you're drinking it.
Yeah.
But a botanist, you know, you probably looked at plant science and you looked at food, you know, vegetables and things like that, and you could understand the biochemistry of food. But there's this wine thing, right, where you're almost like an alchemist. You're turning something into something totally different.
Yeah.
That's so pleasurable and so delicious. And like you said, the skins give the wine that spicy character, and it's not just grape juice anymore.
Yeah, well, exactly. And there's sort of this endless depth of questions. I heard a physicist once say it, and I'm not going to get it right, but it's like the more questions you answer, the larger the perimeter gets of what you don't know. Like there's still so many more things to pursue.
That's funny. My favorite, and I don't want to interrupt you,
No, go
but
ahead.
my favorite quote that reminds me so much of the wine industry, and it's on the box, the board game of Othello. The quote on the box says, "A minute to learn, a lifetime to master."
Yeah, right.
And to me, that's wine. Like you will never master winemaking,
Right.
but you can learn it really fast, and you
Right.
can get the fundamentals down.
Right.
But you'll never be able to not only taste the world of wine, but you'll never be able to actually perfect it.
It's never ending. And I think that that's what attracted me to it, one, as a consumer and just appreciating it, but then as I began to think about, well, what do you want to do with all this scientific understanding you've gained? Because you can, at the end of the day, you can sit down and have 2 glasses of wine like we are, and we could go on for hours about what you could talk about with wine. And that I think people perceive me as having this very technical approach to winemaking. And I really believe that the winemakers that have the best opportunity every year, and as you know, it's only an opportunity, but I think if you're able to sort of embrace what's mysterious about wine and not have to have all the answers, be willing to operate within this space of mystery where you don't totally know what the outcome's going to be, and you're making a gut call. So I brought the 2016 Deerberg Vineyard Chardonnay for you to try.
Great. And this vineyard is located
Much closer, yeah. So this is about 12 miles as a crow flies.
Okay.
Up in Santa Maria Valley.
What's your particular philosophy on Chardonnay?
Well, it stems from what is the family's goals overall, and I think they have a really long-term, multi-generational visions. We want to be producers that lean on classically driven styles that have stood the test of time, because we want to produce something that stands the test of
It's
time.
a real long-term vision.
Right, yeah. Jim said 250 years when I was talking to him about joining the project 6 years ago, and I sort of chuckled, and he said, "No, I'm serious."
Nobody thinks like that.
Nobody thinks like that. But anyway, it does influence the way you approach your vineyards. You know, we're certified sustainable, and we need to continue to work to understand how can we sustain the land we're on, because we're supposed to be handing it to the great grandkids. And then I think with the wines, there are wines that have stood the test of time that, say with Chardonnay, are driven by freshness. Not overdoing the Chardonnay in terms of flavor profile and texture just because we can in California. I think that's what I'm talking about. When I say classicism, it's not the late 80s, 90s rise in richness and butter, but maybe even an era before that where the inspiration was definitely more European. But at the same time, we're not going to apologize about the fact that this is California.
This is really beautiful. I'm detecting butterscotch and lemon. How would you describe this Chardonnay? And this is 2016 estate-grown Chardonnay.
I'm so bad at deconstructing wine into specific flavors.
Oh, that's okay. I mean,
I think that it's one reason I picked this vintage is that where we like this wine to be. So I think citrus, you mentioned citrus, there's that kind of fresh aromatic quality to the Chardonnay. There's something that I don't know how to describe other than saying it smells like good, fresh California Chardonnay. And then in the mouthfeel, you feel that. There's definitely a little more texture and richness that you'd expect from our area, but there's that backbone of acidity and acid.
Yeah.
And
It's really zesty, and it's mouth-watering.
Yeah, and so I think that I brought it because I wanted to share something with you that we felt like this is where we want to live. Like this is where we think represents our vineyard really, really well. Santa Maria Valley, and as a result, Santa Barbara County really, really well.
You know, there's been a lot of, surveying and we've looked at soils and climates, and we've kind of pooled all of our data together as winemakers, and we've decided yeah, this is distinctly different from 40 miles away, and so therefore we should only be planting these varieties in this climate.
Yeah.
And we finally matured, I think, as a wine region where in the past we were just planting everything in the same, in the same appellation, Cabernet, Chardonnay, and now we have the smarts to realize, no, you can't do that.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think some of the original plantings in Santa Maria were like Pinot, then Rose of Cab, then Rose of Merlot.
Right.
And they just put everything out there.
They didn't know what they didn't know yet.
Yeah, and I think what's exciting is when I think of Santa Barbara County, I think it's a place for real wine lovers. That like I said earlier, we're not growing these things as a marketing ploy. It's like the climate allows for this sort of diverse set of varietal expressions that are legitimate. Mm-hmm. And you can spend a day tasting the world of wine in one small area, which is, by the way, not that far from the beach. Big plus.
Absolutely. Well, let's try this Cabernet that you produced. I've tried them many years in a row. And what vintage did you bring today?
I brought the 2015.
Oh, I think I've had that.
And I brought it though because it's the most difficult vintage.
Right, I remember it was so low yielding.
Yeah,
really.
There was the fruit set was so poor that I remember being on the sorting table. And one of our interns was asking me, like, should I sort this out? This is before it hit the distemper. And she picked up a cluster that was a regular sized cluster, and it literally only had about 10 or 15 berries on it. So I was like, no, you can let that go through. Like, we need those 15
every
berries.
drop.
So we had really low yields on cab, and so we had low yields already, and then we making selections. So I bring the wine because we're actually really proud of this wine, but it's an example of we all talk about you need great sites, and you do, but sometimes you have these outlier vintages where there's just a lot of work that is put in the cellar to really do everything you can to still deliver the consistent and good quality you want to become known for. And we turned over every stone and how can we possibly make and craft this blend to really be something special. And so this all took months to do. And
it's amazing. It smells so good. I would compare this to any Cabernet in Napa blind, and I'm sure it would perform well. There's no doubt in my mind. And I would say you are the hallmark, in my opinion, of the Cabernet kingdom here, that we have this little fiefdom of cabs.
Yeah. I like that. It is a fiefdom. We do have a lot of the acreage. This vineyard is why I moved to Santa Barbara, though. But I had not spent that much time crafting Cabernet, and so the opportunity to come down here and be a part of a region that is still trying to figure out what exactly the stamp is in terms of style, but knowing that the quality had such high potential, because if you look at what makes great Bordeaux vintages great, or even great Napa vintages, and you distilled it down to two things, which one guy has done, a guy named Orly Ashenfelter, who developed a mathematical model to predict Bordeaux auction prices. And he did it and he was kind of laughed at, critics like Parker, nah, he doesn't know what he's talking about, he doesn't even taste the wines. But he only used two variables, and the only two variables he used were temperature and rainfall in the summer.
Really?
And people still use this guy's model, like Sotheby's still use this guy's model to forecast Bordeaux auction prices based on vintage information, and it's been shown to, for the most part, be accurate.
I've never heard of this.
And so if that's true, then that suggests that warm vintages with little rainfall
tend to be great
Cabernets,
okay,
right? That people will demand 15 years down the road when they're buying aged versions of it.
Fascinating.
Well, when you say you need limited rainfall and warm temperatures, you are describing Happy Canyon every single year.
Right.
You're describing eastern Santa Barbara County every single year.
It's arid, dry.
And what I saw when I toured this vineyard and got introduced to the Dierberg family was an opportunity to kind of craft Cabernet in a different way, making different choices, but actually still produce something that is classic Cab, maybe above its weight.
Right, which I would say it does. Yeah, it's absolutely beautiful. It's elegant. It's not overpowering. So many people make Cabernet too big, too high in alcohol, too rich, too extracted. This is right in the middle for me between that big, heavy Cabernet and maybe a Bordelaise.
Yeah, I appreciate that, because I never thought I'd have so much fun making cab. It's way more diverse of a variety than I realized. We make probably 30 to 40 different cabs every year, you know, to only bottle 2. And it's a fun, really fun wine to make.
You've stepped into one of the most beautiful vineyards and winery. The winery is absolutely stunning at Star Lane. I mean, it's magnificent, actually.
Yeah.
There must be a lot of collaboration between ownership and the winemaking department.
When I first came on board, we had a lot of conversations and opened up a lot of bottles of wine, mostly to get on the same page about the direction that I thought I was hearing they wanted to go and what I therefore would recommend to them about how we should approach producing the wines. So when I would say things like, hey, I think with the Cabernet, you can lean on the nature of this environment, lower water, you know, warmer temps as we discussed, and as a result you can pick earlier. So then we kind of have that back and forth, and we've continued to have that in perpetuity is the land. And so if we can figure out how to craft wine that is truly tied to the place, that you really get maybe key specific flavors in addition to just general deliciousness, that are, and those key specific flavors are tied to the place, that is something that, if it's attractive, could be sustained generation to generation. So because we have 3 different properties, we sort of divide and conquer how we do our winemaking and tasting. So we have a small winery, more so a tasting room at our Santa Rita Hills property, known as Drum Canyon Vineyard. So it's 7 miles west of Buellton. It's between Buellton and Lompoc, off
Right
246.
off the, 101, 246, right in the middle, right?
And you can taste the whole portfolio there. So the Star Lane, Cabernet, and Bordeaux varietal wines, and the Burgundian varietal wines under the Dierberg label are all there.
In a beautiful setting.
It's a great setting in the country, right next to our vineyard. We renovated it a couple years ago, so it's a really great. I like going out there for meetings, and
luckily we've known each other a little bit, and I've had a chance to try the Star Lane wines at Star Lane Winery, which is stunning. I mean, it's a castle with caves and state-of-the-art equipment and tanks that would make any winemaker drool.
It's true. It is it was well designed to be a winemaker's paradise.
People want to get back to nature. They want to taste the fruits and taste the vegetables and the olives and the things that we can produce out of the soils here in Santa Barbara. And I just love that part, because I feel like we're doing a public service, essentially, to educate people about fine wine and fine food.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that the more we can connect people in sort of a tangible way to the land, the better opportunity we probably have in preserving the sort of rural pastoral feel that I think is the goal of most Santa Barbara County residents. You know, and I think wine is a great avenue for that, and vineyard land as a result. So
we are on the same page, my friend.
Yeah, cheers.
I really appreciate you joining us.
Yeah,
Thank you so much,
fun.
Tyler.
Yeah, great to chat.
Amazing conversation. Cheers. My name is Brian Rice. I'm a third-generation wine grower, and I've been making wine for over 2 decades here in Santa Barbara wine country. It's more than a job. It's a calling. Join me as I talk to my fellow winemakers in a series that is a candid conversation between winemakers discussing their wines, their craft, and their lives over 2 glasses of wine. So I'm 2 glasses in here with Andrew Murray. My name is Brian Rice. I'm the host for 2 glasses in, and one of your first vintages, I believe, was 1992, same with us. But tell me about your journey personally, Andrew, how you got here and why you ended up getting into the wine business.
Yeah, it's a strange journey for sure. I mean, it really began with the passion from my parents. So my parents were in the restaurant business, and so people immediately assume like fine French dining or white tablecloth dining, but no, my parents had Mexican restaurants. They always said tequila paid for my
Margaritas.
Yeah, margaritas and tequila is like what brought me up, and I'm sure it's true. But Dad was a self-made guy, both mom and dad, and had a successful restaurant business in Southern California, where I grew up in Long Beach. But my dad sold his business in 1988, and I was just a sophomore in high school. He moved to Paris, like that was his dream. He just wanted to learn how to cook. And really where it happened was in this restaurant called L'Espérance. Famous chef Marc Monod, he was just getting his 3rd star. It's in Burgundy. That's where I had my first sip of Condrieu. And this very snooty French sommelier, as you can imagine, came up to us and brought us in Burgundy, red Burgundy and white Burgundy. And he would say, oh, can you taste the Côte? Can you taste the Cranberry? And I'm like, dude, that tastes like red and white wine. It was really innocuous. I didn't really care about it. My parents were unimpressed. I'm sure they were really nice bottles of wine. I wish I could retaste those now that I know what I know. He brought us a Philippe Faury Condrieu, and he said, can you taste the pêche? Can you taste the stone fruit? Can you taste the white flower? And I'm like, I can. And so literally, I got into wine because some pompous French dude poured me a glass of wine that was a throwaway glass of wine and said, can you smell these, tropical notes in the wine? And I could. And so I thought I was onto something, literally. And we all looked at each other like, oh my God, I'm good at this. As only an 18-year-old punk-ass kid can do. It's like, or maybe I was younger. I was like 16 years old.
A light bulb moment.
That was my
for
moment.
you.
And so we actually name our red blend. It's called Espérance to this day.
That's why.
To that
I always
moment
wondered. No, I'm really eager to taste your stuff. What did you bring?
I brought 2 bottles today. I brought our 2017 Syrah Tous les Jours.
Nice. Let's get started.
All right. Should we open this one?
Sure. Screw cap, huh?
Screw cap. Oh yeah. We started with screw caps. We were early adopters. I think it was back in 2003 or something like that. It all started because of a wine dinner in Germany. There were many of us. I was probably the most junior winemaker there, but we had about 30% of the wines that night at Tantris, this famous restaurant in Munich, that were all corked. And it just destroyed me. Here I was, I went all the way to Europe to sell our wine, and most of them were corked. So we literally came home and started exploring screw tops right after that.
I don't blame you. This smells amazing.
So this is a multi-site wine. So when I started the winery back in 1990, all of our wines were, I think really affordable, but back then they were like 25 to 40 bucks. And I was just coming out of high school. None of my friends could afford our wines, and they would just cry to me, you need to make wine that's more affordable, or we're going to keep drinking beer. And Tous les Jours was born out of that. Tous les Jours means every day. So this wine is varied from all over the valley. So back in the day, it was actually an estate wine, very small production. It's grown to about 13,000 cases a year.
Wow.
So Tous les Jours is now about 25% estate grown, and the balance, we have like a rule for Tous les Jours, it all has to come from 5 miles of the winery's front door. So it's labeled as San Ynez Valley, so it's 100% San Ynez Valley. We farm or direct the farming for 100% of the sites for this wine. So we want it to taste like Syrah, but nationally it's about a $19 bottle of wine. You can find it on sale at sometimes for like 14, 15 bucks.
Oh wow, that's
so
a huge
it's super,
value.
Yeah, super available, super accessible. And I find that a lot of the wines in this price point are over oaked with like wood chips or whatever, or they're sweet. We wanted this wine to be more of an aspirational Syrah, a really legitimate, authentic Syrah. So it has the herbal spice notes that Syrah is famous for, those gamey notes. But it's unmistakably Californian. It's fruity, it's bright, it's got natural acidity from our cool climate.
And do you also sell it in your tasting room?
It's the one wine we don't sell in our tasting room, so you have to go and buy this somewhere else.
Okay, all right. Very expressive of, as you said, the terroir of the central San Ynez Valley. Syrah seems to be a wine that hasn't really taken off in our industry, but I know you've been dedicated to it since the beginning. And how has Syrah morphed into something successful for you versus a lot of other wineries?
That terrible joke is what's the difference between Syrah and pneumonia? You can get rid of pneumonia. It's not been true for us. We looked at ourselves and said, what do we know? What do we like? Where should we go? And so we doubled down with Syrah, and that's when we started making more Syrah tous les jours. And it's basically, not last year, but the years before that, it was almost doubling every year in production. So it's 13,000 cases now, but it was only got a couple thousand cases a few years ago.
Wow, what a success story.
We got a great score and changed distributors and
right, and Robert Parker really put Santa Barbara County on the map with his highly accoladed wines from you and Jim Clendenin and all of these
the other
cast of
guys for sure,
characters.
yeah.
But let me ask you a personal question about scores. Okay, so we need scores to sell wine. Obviously, it's a big factor, especially in the broad market.
Yeah.
Obviously, you've done very well with scores. I mean, it's certainly allowed you to go into every market in the country and now internationally. But from a personal winemaker to winemaker perspective, how important is the scores for you to know if the wine is good or bad?
Oh, irrelevant. I don't want to overstate this, but as artists, I think maybe, I don't write books, I don't know how to paint, but there's nothing worse than sort of begging someone to judge you, I mean, it's terrifying. There's no fun in that. And, when they give you a great score, you always, oh yeah, they're the smartest people on the planet. And when they're not very nice to you, they're like, oh, they just didn't get it, So, I mean, it's prevalent in any world where, there's sort of a bit of connoisseurship or consumership, But I tell people, it's like, you say you can't sell Syrah, buy this one, I promise you'll sell it. And almost every time it sells. So I think making it available, affordable, authentic helps a lot. So we sort of did it the easy way and just made it affordable.
Well, you've done a great job, and thank you. You're really a pioneer for this variety in Santa Barbara County, and you stuck with it. That took a lot of courage, right? A lot of wineries get nervous and they switch their programs and then they lose track of who they are. You've been committed to Syrah, and you've helped develop Santa Barbara County as a Syrah producer and a Syrah region.
I hope to live up to that, so thank you.
Yeah, well, keep it up. Thank you. I really appreciate it, and this wine is astounding. Let's dive into this roasted slope, and I'd love to explain to people, if you don't mind, what roasted slope means. I don't think people realize that there's this old world heritage around that phrase.
Truth be told, when we started the winery, we only wanted to grow Viognier, and so it was actually a nursery mistake that brought us to Syrah in the first place. So we planted 1990, 93, we're getting ready to make our first Viognier, and it all turns red.
That is crazy. I never knew that story.
It's all Syrah.
So this was a complete accident.
Oh yeah, we make 95% Syrah today, and it all started with Viognier. So
that's the antithesis to the situation we had. We were planting Merlot and Syrah, and we ended up with an accidental nursery mistake of Viognier.
Is that right?
Yeah, only 1 acre, scattered throughout the entire vineyard.
Yeah, no, it's so interesting. I didn't know that.
And we offloaded all the vines, not knowing, of course, and putting them into the ground. And then 2 years later, with our first yield, we saw these beautiful golden, sweet grapes right around August 15th. And next thing you know, DNA comes back as Viognier, and we were in the Viognier business. So
Roasted Slope is let me get there, is a 8% Viognier Syrah blend. So it's 92% Syrah, 8% Viognier by whole cluster weight. So
co-fermented, or are you blending? It is co-fermented.
Yeah.
So it's just like in Côte Rôtie, the same methodology. They throw all the white clusters in with the red clusters in the picking baskets. And
so I realized I had this opportunity. We had this mishmash of a vineyard. So we created Roasted Slope, and Côte Rôtie, which I think is the most astounding Syrah vineyard on the planet, not just visually, but just qualitatively, historically. I mean, there's Roman terraces, it's amazing. So we created the direct translation of Côte Rôtie, it means roasted slope.
Oh, it's absolutely stunning. It's super powerful, but elegant. What would you take it out? What would you pair it with? What's kind of your favorite pairing with this wine?
I don't know, any day that ends in Y. It's I like this one with like heavier fare. So like I love Syrah games, so like lamb, duck. We've got a great local restaurant like SY Kitchen. They do this polenta and like osobuco thing, and it's like they serve it there, so it'd be like really good with that. Is what I always think of. So
man, we have to go.
Yeah, we should do that.
We have to go do that. That sounds really
do that
good.
stat.
So tell me, how can people find this wine?
Unfortunately,
They have to know you?
no, it's not that. It's but they do basically have to get it from the winery or the winery's website. I think maybe we sell 10 cases a year outside of the winery.
So they have to come to your tasting room to get it. And tell me about your tasting room. Where is it located?
Yeah,
How do they find it?
We're on, Fox and Canyon Road on the Fox and Canyon Wine Trail, the heart of Los Olivos. Not hard to find. We're andrewmurrayvineyards.com. But the winery itself is a beautiful building. We only moved into that space. It's our third move, hopefully our last. We moved in there just 4 years ago, and it's the old Curtis Winery. It's a beautiful,
legendary.
yeah, it's a beautiful
Got
space.
a lot of history.
Yeah, it was a Rhone varietal winery for the Firestone family, so it's feels so cool to sort of continue that tradition.
Absolutely.
It's really an honor. But the space itself is it was a guy's private art collection or art gallery, and so it was never designed to be a winery. So when you flow through the space, it doesn't feel like it was ever going to be a winery. We've got places where it feels like you're in there in a living room, barrel room, and a tasting room. There's all these little private spaces, and I love it.
Yeah, so
It's a
do I.
beautiful space. Yeah, you have a beautiful space as well. So
Thank you.
I come and steal ideas from you. Don't worry.
Well, that's the beauty of Santa Barbara County is we all share information and equipment and knowledge, and in some cases, marketing. We co-market together and we help each other out where we can. And
We've made wines together for
that's
charity.
right. We've helped local schools
Yeah.
together. And one of my favorite parts about Santa Barbara County and this wine country that we've been somewhat raised in is the characters, the cast of characters, all the players, from the pioneers like Kathy Joseph and Jim Clendenin to the rising stars, Jill Russell would be good examples. They all have this sense of pride and respect for our region. I think everyone feels enlisted in the Santa Barbara wine country story, that it is a special place. And it's got a camaraderie and a sense of respect for each other as winemakers.
I haven't really made wine anywhere else. You're talking about young rising stars, McKenna Jardine. I've hired my replacement. She's on her way. She's already making our sister label, the 11 wines, but more forward searching than ever.
It feels like open source, right? Like we're
I feel like
welcoming.
we're incubating something now. I remember when the Fess Parker did more than a few favors for me, but I remember I'm never going to be able to help them. They're like Big Brother Winery down the street, but they're like press broke one day, and 3 tons of grapes showed up, and we were able to put it through my ghetto press that we had at the time. And I remember oh man, I was finally able to pay it forward. And I've been able to do it in spades since then, but this was like a lifetime ago. And so I feel like our industry in general, we all sort of want each other to do really, really well, I think. I think one of the most comfortable things about where we are in our place is, I've traveled around. When I was at UC Davis, there was a guy named Jean-Louis Chave there. He was 14th generation wine grower.
Wow.
We're 47 years here in Santa Barbara County.
Right.
We're laying a foundation that I hope will be like, the Roman Empire of the future. We're laying a foundation where people are going to be building on top of what we've done, and hopefully we'll all figure out a way to, stay relevant and important and useful. But if nothing else, hopefully we've helped lay a cornerstone that allowed what's coming next to be important.
I'm excited to see where we go from here.
But for now, I'm not slowing down. I'm 47, and I feel like I just got started. So
You're a young man.
hopefully I get to do this for a bunch more years.
We get at least 50 more years out of you, right?
I hope so. That would be nice. This might help. It may not either, but it might help. So.
Well, I'll see you in 2070, my friend.
All right. And all the years in between, I hope. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah.